welcome to you all. I will call this meeting to order and note that we have a full house and at the council table as well, so we have quorum. And I will ask you all to join me in a moment of reflection as we consider the business of the corporation. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest around the table, knowing that we can so declare at any time? Seeing none, we will move on to announcements. Anyone want to start off? I will then. Sorry, Deputy Mayor, I saw your hand up there.
Thank you very much, and permission. Firstly, on behalf of the board, I wanted to session will take place right here in Meaford at our community center. The focus will be on hospitality and tourism in place week course period beginning on October 20th. For further information, they can reach out to me or to 9538-1640. To make the municipality of Meaford in partnership with will be joining the Canada Waste program's primary purpose is to have daily messaging through the municipal website, even on the spot, but also in the Meaford Independent, I believe. A situation that over 10.5 million tons of clothing are recycled. The average person throws away 81 pounds of textile and for produce items. Again, I think we can that last year, globally, the total amount of electronic was 7 million tons, and only 20% of this was recycled. So just in closing, efforts, but I think we can all learn something new to recycle more. So please, news that comes forward during that week, and we'll just all work together to make Meaford even stronger with recycling. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor. I was sure you'd have that for Labour. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. And on a Sunday held, it's an annual event. It's not in our municipality. It's actually the Grey County Museum at Morriston Village. Celebration of the Prairie Oaten Festival. A very, very important festival for those of us who have a lot of Irish blood in them. Sunday 11 to 4, there's food, costumed interpreters, a lot of music. I think there's 5 different musical groups, and apparently there are a variety of potato treats. That's what this is all about. Now, I'm rather disappointed. It didn't say anything in the write-up about what the Irish are really famous for. But check it out, and maybe you can find out for yourself. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to take this opportunity, fellow councillors, to actually, I know that you will all agree with my coming comment, to say thank you to Mr. Stephen Vance. Over the last little while, we all participated in coffee with a councillor, and from this councillor's seat, I know I enjoyed my time sitting with Stephen talking about our lives, and I have met many people who have expressed that they really enjoyed the articles, Mr. Vance, and when I came into the council chambers this afternoon, sitting on my seat was a full set of coffee with councillor editions, and I want to thank Stephen for that, and I hope that the residents took opportunity to read a little bit, as I know that the desire of those articles was to let folks just get to know us just a little bit differently, and I just wanted to say thank you to the Meaford Independent.
Thank you, Stephen. I want to start off with something that I've been waiting to hear for a long, long time. It's very, very exciting news. As we speak this afternoon at 3 o'clock, this is a media conference with the Minister Fulton, Minister of Health, and our own MPP, Bill Walker, to announce that Meaford Long-Term Care Facility has received an additional 51 beds to bring us up to a quota of 128, which is an optimum number of long-term care beds for wonderful, wonderful news. So stay tuned, folks, because there's more to come on that one, but this was just too good to keep under our hats today. We would be there, except for being here with you folks this afternoon, so wanted to share that with you. So, on to our other exciting events, our Scarecrow Parade and Family Festival, Friday, October the 4th, 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., and I'm assuming that we muster for the parade on Collingwood Street and still march down Sykes Street. The bridge will be open, and we certainly encourage everyone to come and join us for the parade and the Family Festival Invasion down at the Harbour Pavilion following the parade. 6 to 8:30 p.m. And I know all of the volunteers who have worked so hard for a year in preparing the display that we have in the town and out in Bognor as well. Had the opportunity to go out and have a look at the efforts that those folks have put on out in Bognor, and it really is great to see that kind of interaction within our municipality. So come out and join us and have fun. Same on that weekend, of course, as part of the Apple Harvest Craft Show on Saturday beginning at 10 to 6 p.m. and Sunday, October the 6th from 10 to 4:30 p.m. at the Meaford and St. Vincent Community Centre. Over 200 artisans and crafters come out, and there's a long waiting list for participants in this. It is a juried show of unique and talented craftspeople, and a great way to start your Christmas shopping. I want to also mention that on Saturday, October the 12th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. is the Meaford Fire Open House. Fire Hall at 81 Stewart Street will once again be opening its doors to the community. This is your chance to get a behind-the-scenes look at our firefighting equipment and take part in fun activities for the whole family. There's an obstacle course, truck tours, a hose target, fire extinguisher training. That is really something to see. All the little kids love to have a go at that fire extinguisher and the hose. Grey County EMS, the OPP, Canadian Coast Guard, and the Canadian Armed Forces will all be joining in on the fun that day. And that was all I had after yours, Deputy Mayor. So is there anything that anyone else has spurred this on? Okay, then we'll move on to public participation. And again, we welcome everyone to come and join us as we review the business of the corporation, and starts with public participation. We certainly encourage everyone to provide council with their opinions, their comments, and questions. Presentations are pre-arranged, and we have two this afternoon. We do encourage deputations on items that we're going to be discussing within the agenda, but questions can be asked on anything of any interest. There are time limits to those. So first off, we will certainly welcome our presentations. And the first one we have is Christidis, I hope I pronounced that right, for the ITFD fire agreement and master fire plan. Welcome, Chris. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Your Worship, yes, you have.
Thank you.
Council members, staff, and guests. First of all, I want to thank you for allowing me to appear before you and speak and address council. My name is Christidis, and I live in the town of Meaford. I'm here today to ask and urge council to invest in the fire department and keep our residents and community safe. When my wife and I were considering retirement, we chose Meaford by design. And 5 years ago, we made Meaford our home. Meaford is not strange to us, as we have a long history of family cottaging in the area. Meaford offers everything we're looking for: fresh air, solitude, services, diverse geographic landscape, a vibrant downtown with shops and restaurants, theater, waterfront, and harbor. And most important, friendly people, great neighbors. Now, most members of our families, mine and my wife's, served in policing and firefighting, as well as in the military, but mostly firefighters, uncles, cousins, and one still serving. You can imagine the interesting conversations around the table at a family reunion when we recently had, for example, in Hillsburg last month. So you might say, appearing before you today, I have a particular interest as well as some understanding of the challenges on the subject. I appear with no personal interest to gain here, only a desire to have a safe community. For today's purposes, I'm going to rely on the 2019 Master Fire Plan for my comments, and brief reference to the 2011 Consultants Report as well. Unless I'm misinformed, the 2019 Master Fire Plan is the guiding document for providing adequate fire services and in accordance with Ontario standards. The plan, a document which I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are quite familiar with, is a comprehensive, detailed, informative document. It is also a great recipe for an outstanding yet affordable fire service. The plan identifies many shortcomings, issues such as training, equipment, documentation, staffing, but this plan also offers a future that protects our firefighters and gives comfort to our residents. I don't have the time today, obviously, to go into much detail in the time allotted, but I do want to touch on a couple of points of the report and its recommendations. In the absence of any other information which I may not be aware of, and I don't claim to have intimate knowledge of possible sidebar conversations, for example, there's one very glaring area that needs attention, and that is adequate fire response to the western section of the community. The report makes an abundantly clear case of the inadequacy of response times by the ITFD, or the Inter-Township Fire Department, and the need for a second fire hall. So when Meaford announced we were going to negotiations with the ITFD, it obviously got my attention. With many residents I've spoken with in the area where I live, and business, and some are here today, there's grave concern with the present level of fire service in the western section. Firstly, many residents don't even realize fire response for the western section of Meaford is coming from the other side of the bay. For those that are aware, response is from the other side of the bay. There's almost a resignation that fire response will be too late, and that's sad. But that can all be remedied with the recommendations in the fire plan. Looking at the response times of the ITFD, the provincial standard is 14 minutes for rural areas, generally speaking, from the time the truck crew assembles to arrival at a scene. The first volunteer firefighter arrival at a scene in their private vehicle does not count. It's not the standard. And what would you expect from a lone firefighter in their personal vehicle with no support and no equipment? In fact, according to the fire plan report, and I cite page 51 on the map, clearly illustrates that most of the municipality in the west can't be reached within the standard 14 minutes. It's well above 20 minutes for many areas, and that is very worrisome. The only logical solution is to implement the recommendation of establishing a fire station on the corridor along Highway 26 in the area of County Road 11 and Billy Bishop Airport, or other suitable location, which would then provide far better and timely response. A similar recommendation was made in the 2011 Consultants Report. How do we pay for it? Again, the plan makes a very good case for an affordable solution. Take the 25% stake in the ITFD and use it as a base to establish a second fire station in one of the areas noted. As stated in page 59 of the report, equipment can be reclaimed from the ITFD, and furthermore, the annual operational cost, and this is the jewel in the plan, is that it would be less than what we're paying the ITFD now. As well, the report states several other financial benefits to the municipality in this approach. In the background, we have a growing community with more residents and businesses being established. This brings more demand for services, but as well an expanding tax base. So as we enter negotiations with the ITFD, the only thing to negotiate, ladies and gentlemen, is an exit strategy. The status quo is not adequate in light of the mentioned facts. Lastly, that magic word, liability, is mentioned in the plan several times. We are a relatively small town, large geographically, but we live in a modern world, in an increasingly litigious world. This plan is a public document now, and it places an onus. I don't know about you, but I would rather see my tax dollars invested in the community rather than benefiting lawyers. I'm going to borrow from the words from our worship's webpage, Message to the Community, on council strategic priorities. If you don't know where you're going, you might end up someplace else. We don't want to be someplace else. So I urge you and ask you to carefully consider the recommendations of the Master Fire Plan, think forward, and invest in our fire services and keep our communities safe. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Christidis. We really appreciate your comments and certainly couldn't agree more. We are working very, very hard to enact every one of the recommendations in the Master Fire Plan. So we take your comments very, very seriously, and we appreciate your time that you've taken to come and share them with us today.
Do you have any questions of me?
We're good now. Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
your
Worship.
comments. Okay. The second presentation we have are advocates for Memorial Park. We have Dan White and Liz Harris.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, and Council. What we're here for today is Advocates of Memorial Park is a group of Meaford residents representing diverse interests, sharing one common objective: to ensure that the Meaford residents have a more meaningful opportunity to shape the future of Memorial Park. Our members include Ann Booty Horwood, Tom Bubstead, Bonnie Bumstead, Marissa Dolatalis, Liz Harris, Leslie Kenyon, Susan Taylor, and myself, Dan White. As a group, we're concerned that Meaford residents were not sufficiently consulted about the future of the park. The information presented at the public meeting hosted by the municipality on April 15th was based on a survey of 600 campers over the summer of 2018, one meeting with each of the adjacent homeowners, the kinsmen, and the Friends of Memorial Park, as well as some input from the staff. Concepts were presented at that meeting were developed before the general public was consulted, and Meaford residents were given only 3 weeks to respond to their thoughts on those. So what we did, first of all, thank you as a council group for giving us an extension on the input period. We used that time to raise awareness of the park planning process and to engage the community in discussions by way of social media platforms. We also hosted a public meeting on July 16th, and as many of you know, there was an overcapacity crowd and a clear indication that residents want to keep the park generally as is. That evening, we launched a public survey, and today we're here pleased to announce the findings of that survey. As we'll show you, those findings are reinforced by other communications, including letters to the editor and social media commentaries. What we heard from the people. Top line results indicate that the public wants to keep the park as is with better maintenance and housekeeping. They have a vision. We all want to protect the public inclusiveness and environmental integrity of the park. Now, on to a little bit more detailed findings. Just got to figure out which button. Okay. So, we had 632 respondents to our survey. 75% of them are currently Meaford residents, and 76% of the respondents have been using the park for more than 10 years. When we asked what enhancements they'd like to see, the top 3 responses were increased housekeeping, 50%, a snack bar with hot and cold food, 43%, and increased park grounds maintenance, 38%. On the possibility of cabins, 62% said absolutely no to cabins, 13% said that they might be in favor, and 25% said that they needed more information before they could make a decision. 38% of the respondents that are campers, to our survey here, that are campers, use tents or trailers, and they don't require sewers or 50 amp services, but would need washroom facilities. With regards to the park's configuration, 64% said they want it left as is, and 66% feel that the split between camping and day use is just right. While only 31% support reducing the number of campsites and increasing green space, and 3% support increasing campsites. So, in closing, we found that many respondents were opposed to a 25-year plan. 69%, oh yes, I missed one line. Concerning beach access, 51% want more beach access for the general public. So, in closing, we found that many respondents were opposed to a 25-year plan. 69% favor a 10-year plan instead. And it's worth noting that a 25-year plan is not mandated by the provincial government, and AMP's research found that communities across our region have no more than 10-year park plans. Respondents also had strong feelings about being informed about the design of the design team's final proposal. 75% want a public meeting and access to online information prior to a council decision. And finally, the vast number of respondents, 83%, support the creation of a public advisory committee for Memorial Park. Other inputs that we received were from social media commentary and letters to the editor reinforced these survey findings. They also indicate an overwhelming endorsement on the ongoing support of the park by the Kin family and especially Kin Camp. There was also sentiment shared at our July 16th meeting. At that meeting, we gathered a long list of operational concerns which we handed to Rob Armstrong. In our view, a number of these concerns and ideas would help to improve amenities and the overall attractiveness of the park, and therein support revenue generation. Some of these included improved housekeeping and maintenance, a snack bar offering hot and cold food, and possible laundry facilities. In conclusion, all the AMP members are passionate about Memorial Park, and Meaford residents are as well. The public has spoken. Clearly, they want to be engaged and consulted. The park was deeded for public use, and the public wants to keep it that way. They want their views reflected in the next proposal, and they want the opportunity to have input before council votes on that. As indicated by 83%, we recommend that the council endorse a return to public advisory committees, and we'd like to take this opportunity to thank you, the council, for allowing us to present the voice of the public on this very important issue. I've got copies of our survey results, and I've got 2 copies for you, so you have one for yourself and the design team group, and one for each of the councillors and mayor, deputy mayor, and we'll hand those to whoever needs them. Who should I? Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate your comment and certainly appreciate the passion with which you and your committee have taken this on. And obviously, members of our community agree with that and concur with that passion. It's great to see. We all love Memorial Park. It's certainly something that we all enjoy and visit frequently. I'll ask Council if there's any comments or any questions. Councillor Vickers.
Dan, if I could ask, the comments about the cottages, is there any merit, did the committee see any merit in the bicyclers wanting to come to the park, like bike to the park, where you couldn't carry a lot of stuff or like a tent. I guess some people could, but other people wouldn't want to carry a lot of, tenting and that sort of thing. Is there any merit that, or any thought that that might be a useful part of the park with the cabins? And that's, yeah, I'll ask it there.
Okay. Based on our survey, we only asked 3 questions. Do you support yes, no, or do you need more information? As we showed, the yes people were a very small number, I think 3%. The no's were very strong, and then 25% said that they needed more information. There were some comments made that were at the bottom of the survey, and we can pull them out of the survey. But the general concern appeared to be that what happens in the winter time when those are abandoned spaces that can be occupied when there's nobody there watching and what's going on, and also just general, if we're having problems keeping the maintenance and the cleanliness up of what we've already got, how can we put more facilities in there and expect that we're going to maintain them in a high enough manner to make it worthwhile?
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. And Dan, I just want to thank you so much for your presentation. I want to add my appreciation to the mayors, to all of the members of AMP who have worked so hard over these last months to gather this information and research, and to include the public of our community, and to bring that report back to us here at Council. It's greatly appreciated. One question for you, Dan, if I may, in relation to camping trailers, RVs, and so on, has AMP had a chance to do any research in terms of what the growing trends are? Are people buying bigger trailers or smaller trailers, or is there a movement back to tenting, or what have you learned throughout this process in that regard?
Okay, actually, I can answer that with an all of the above. We've seen the trailers appear to be going from RV to trailer, not changing much in size, but trailers are less expensive than the fifth wheel type because of the costs put into them. So trailers are becoming more popular than fifth wheels for the simple fact that they cost less for approximately the same amenities. They're just a little harder to pull. We also have noticed, even by personal observation this year, we had an awful lot more tenters and tent trailers in the park this year than I've seen in quite a while. And I believe as economic times get a little tougher, which appears to be the prognosis going forward, that things are going to start tightening up, you'll see more people going into less expensive ways. So tenting will still become, or will still be, a very viable method of getting out in nature. So those are what we've seen so far going forward, and the websites show that trailers are selling more than fifth wheels for sure. And buses are even lower than that now. Okay.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Dan, for putting this together. I was at your meeting at the Curling Club, packed house, and I was a little concerned at the time. There was 4 boards on the wall, Plan 1, 2, 3, and 4. Anybody I talked to was under the impression that you had to take all of 1, or all of 2, or all of 3, or all of 4. That's not what it was designed for. It was designed, was there anything in any of them plans that you liked? Having said that, what you're saying now is you've come up with 0 changes. There was nothing in any of them you liked?
What we're saying is that the respondents to our survey, when asked what amenities they would like to see and not like to see, and you'll see the details when you get your copy of the survey, we asked the questions: would you like to see cabins? Would you like to see more trailer sites? Would you like to see less trailer sites? Would you like to see, and we went through and tried to capture as much detail as we could and give them the opportunity to respond on what they felt was important. And the majority of them, when asked if you liked the amount of current sites versus would you like to change it up or down, the majority said keep it as is. When we asked them, would you like to see more sites in the upper field or less in the lower field, or more in the lower field and less in the upper field, they said we would like it the way it is. And if there was any movement towards anything right now, there was more people that responded just have them on the upper field and not the lower field, just because that made them feel like they would have more waterfront for public use.
Thank you.
Councillor Kentner.
Dan, where does Mr. Propakak, where does he fit in the ski? He's not a member of, okay, I see him back there then. What do you think, to me, the biggest revelation about Memorial Park is just the road we've been going down excludes the general public from part of the beachfront, a significant part of the beachfront. And I'm coming to the conclusion that that is the nux of the problem. How does AMP feel about going back to a natural shoreline and making the entire waterfront at Memorial Park available to everybody?
As a group, we have never, AMP has never said one way or another, because we're just trying to report what the public has said. And all we're doing in our group, we have different views amongst ourselves on how we would like to see that. But our mandate was to poll the public and see what they wanted, and the results from that are in the package that we've given in, and we've highlighted some of the points, but your point is spoken to there. Would you like to see more beach for public? Would you like to see, I think 51% said more beach for public. And a lot of people said keep the beach broken up the way it is. What I find is that the section of beach that is excluded is not physically excluded, but it's mentally excluded by the people going down there, feeling that because there are people parked right by that wall, we shouldn't go down there. There's no law says, or no rule says that they can't go down there, but they feel like that's not available to them. So it's a perception issue as much as anything else in my mind. With the water up as high as it is right now, there's no beach for anybody. I mean, we have one small stretch of beach from about the middle of the beach down to the end of the dog beach that has not been totally washed away or is still accessible. But other than that, there's almost no beachfront there. But that's a natural thing. We can't change that.
Councillor Kentner.
And for the record, the donors of Memorial Park, I believe, have expressed themselves recently as in favor of restoring the entire beachfront to the general public.
That's my understanding as well,
Thank
yes.
you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Dan, you mentioned in your report that 75%, I believe, of the respondents suggested they'd like to see an advisory committee continue in some...
81%.
81%, I'm sorry. I was trying to write down too many numbers. 81%. So that's a pretty strong number. So people want to see continued opportunities for input. So can you expand a little bit on how you see that role as it moves forward with Memorial Park? And are you saying that your AMP group is interested in continuing to provide input to this council in that regard?
I would say that what the public has told us is that they want a voice on things like Memorial Park or the park systems. I think that anybody on the AMP group would be proud to be part of that group. We would love to have a say. I think there's other groups that would love to have a say. But what I feel is very important for this group to hear is that the public love the parks. They feel we have a gem. They want some feeling that they've got some control over how it's looked after and what's done to it, and that they feel that they have some good information to add.
Dan, I have a question too, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results of your survey and all of the answers that you got. And was there a section in there that allowed for some spontaneous recommendations, not recommendations, but perhaps suggestions, some creative ideas that might come forward for, and you've suggested, you've labeled it a 10-year plan, let's call it a multi-year plan for Memorial Park. Which is, I think, one of the things that the public input we were all hoping that would have is some creative thoughts about the longevity of a plan for Memorial Park. And I'm just wondering if was anything in your survey or in the commentary that you've collected that would give us something to send to the consultants that would could be incorporated into one or more different variations of the concepts that they presented.
As far as the overall length of the plan, I think that the majority of people were saying that they felt that a 10-year plan was plenty because things changed so much. But there were areas for comments on the forums. We can gather those comments up and submit them as well, because there's an awful lot of comments that it would take probably about twice as much paper as we've already got there to put all the comments together to give them to you from the survey. But we can pull the comments that talk about anything in particular that you're looking for and submit them in with the forms that go into the design team.
I think that would be helpful to the consultants, because in terms of the extension of the commentary period, it's important that the consultants then have something else to go on looking forward down the way. A lot of the comments that you presented are housekeeping and maintenance and operational kinds of comments, which are really important, really valuable information, and will be looked at in terms of our operational crew. But in terms of going forward and creating a master plan for Memorial Park, and indeed this is one of many of the parks that we've got here, I think it's really important to have that some creative ideas as well as to, you know, what might be acceptable, what might be something to think about over the long haul, over a longer period of time, 10, 25, whatever we want to call it, but you know, an extended period of time, so that we're looking ahead, we're looking at anticipating what might be required, what might be important to have in our public spaces. That's what I think our consultants would be looking for, and I know our staff would be looking for in terms of moving that ahead.
Yeah, and I know that there are comments on how to improve things and that haven't been brought out individually, but I think would be of a benefit to look at, to say, okay, if we adopt this, maybe that will increase our revenues or increase our stays or things like that. And I know that there are some groups of people that would love to continue on working towards making this a better long-term park.
Well, Deputy Mayor?
Your Worship, thank you. And just along those lines, if I may ask Mr. Armstrong, in terms of next steps, so this information will go to the consultants at Burnside, and then is another public meeting part of the process, or what sort of happens next?
Under the current proposal or plan with council is obviously this will be sent to them. They'll evaluate it. I'm not too sure when we'll get back to council in this, because as council's aware, we're diving deep into our budget for next year, and they're going to be very busy over the next little bit. So we'll have to find out when we would get back to council with that. The intent is that the consultant would come and present their proposal, their final plan to council, present, and then there'll be an extended period of time to which the public will have the plan, and then we would come back to council to, staff have to review it as well, because we haven't seen the plan and provide comments to it. We would come back to council at that point to take a position on the final plan. We haven't, but there wasn't, those are public meetings, but not a public meeting per se as part of the original plan to get public input in a formal method. It is a council meeting. We do have the ability to provide deputations on stuff that comes before council. That's the current plan before council and considering the final plan.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Dan, and your group for all your hard work and a lot of hours and a lot of investigation. We've heard quite a bit about the obvious assets for the park, the waterfront, the parking, both for our recreational vehicles and just visitors, automobiles and so on and so forth. Did you spend much time on what I think is equally as important to the park, the forested area? There's this urban forest that we are blessed with having. And we know there are a lot of trails here and there through it. We've heard comments that some of the trails are too wide, some are too narrow. there isn't a really system of trails. Did you get into that at all with your?
There were
with your
questions on the survey that addressed the number of trails, the forested areas. Generally, the returned information was that they wanted to protect the forested areas. They did not want to invade them. They liked the trails that were there. They didn't profess to want more trails, but they wanted to keep the trails that were currently there. And that information is borne out by the packet that we'll be giving to you.
Anything further? Yes, one more.
Sorry, Your Worship, just one more if I may, and just back to Mr. Armstrong's response to my last question. And thinking that this AMP group has put a lot of time and effort into this project and this presentation, I'm wondering if there's any way to request of Burnsides that we expound in some fashion on the opportunity for public input when the draft plan comes forward. And I don't know how that could be done, if it could be a special meeting here at Council or just some fashion where the public can continue to have input into that draft.
Through your worship, we can review that as part of the process. Obviously, when we have a budget for this project, and if we engage Burnside into additional public meetings, it will come with additional cost. So council will need to be aware of that in consideration. So, but we can report back to council in that regard.
And there was a public presentation involved with it once council has had a chance to have a look at what the consultants present to us, correct?
That's correct, yes. Yeah.
So that will happen in any case. Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate your time this afternoon, and thank you to everyone who has joined us and shown us the passion that everyone feels for Memorial Park. We really appreciate it. Okay, we'll move on now to council inquiries. Anything around the table?
I don't know if you just want to do a last call of any public questions following the presentations.
I could
we
do
didn't
that.
have any registered, but we might have a few.
Is there a last call for anyone who has a question for us before we move on in the agenda? Please come forward, and if you would, please come forward and state your name for the record. 2 minutes for a question. Hannah? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dirk Bauman, and my question is, what was the problem that we're trying to solve about Memorial Park to begin with? Why was Burnside hired?
It was to complete a 25-year, or a long-term plan, 25-year a master plan for Memorial Park.
But a plan to accomplish what?
To determine the future of Memorial Park, but I'll give this over to
Your
the...
worship, there was no vision that had been established by the municipality with regard to Memorial Park, and based on that lack of vision, there was no clear direction on how capital expenditures, should we be replacing buildings, should we be fixing buildings. So until we had that vision, which this plan was intended to do, we were challenged on a year-by-year basis to figure out where our priorities should be for spending funds. We kind of know where they've ended up recently by fixing the break wall, but on the go forward, that has been the intent of this plan. So by engaging the public and figuring out what the vision of the park is, council endorsing a vision through a master plan, then that can direct our capital funding year over year on expenditures.
Thank you, Rob. Much more fulsome explanation than mine. Thanks for your question, Dirk. Appreciate it. All right, we'll move on then to council inquiries. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'll start. I'm sorry, I have 3. First one, I'm wondering if we have any idea when we will receive the alternate bridge solutions report.
Through your worship, I would figure March 2021. But it will come at the same time as the transportation master plan. We're actually kind of expediting this whole process. Typically, what we've seen from other communities is that a transportation master plan usually takes about 18 months. We're in the process right now of just finalizing the RFP to get it out, but we wanted to wait until Our new Director of Infrastructure was in place so that she had a chance to actually review the document before it was posted. So it'll get posted here shortly and go through the process so that we have a consultant that will start in probably December. And then because this is tied to provincial grant money that we got that has to be spent by March 2021, we've set that as the deadline that the project has to be completed.
Okay, so in relation to that then, can you remind me please, Darcy, with the boundary agreement with Chatsworth, and when we expect to see that back before council, and how quickly then we can move forward with the 21-22 bridge reconstruction? We're not tying that to this report, are we?
Through your worship, I'm going to take that one. As council received the report at the last meeting, the boundary road agreements for all of our neighbours will be coming forward shortly. I'm still expecting that we should be able to see that boundary road agreement in October. At that stage, council will be able to decide, as will the council of the Township of Chatsworth, whether they wish to move forward with bridge projects in 2020. Obviously, both councils have to agree to such a significant capital expenditure, and both councils have to agree to waive the 2-year waiting period that's standard in a boundary road agreement for capital projects. I believe that waiver will happen because both communities want to resolve this, but both communities have to be on the same side. At that stage, if they're not, we have to go through an arbitration process. If they are, then we can move forward with the EA. As we've been saying for at least a year, the EA would take place in 2020, and so at the earliest any construction would happen will be 2021.
Did you have another one, or are you done?
Or I do. Okay, so back to our discussion at the last council meeting about bike lanes on Frogs Hollow. And I think I'm confused there. So does that mean that we're still moving forward with a discussion about a cycling policy in general, or we are? Okay, so we may see that.
Council only dealt with the clause which was to award an RFP to an engineer to redesign that road. The other part of that resolution that still exists is to direct staff to bring forward a policy on when cycle lanes will be considered, but I believe that will be part of the Transportation Master Plan as well.
Okay.
Through your worship, just to follow up, we have added that into the Transportation Master Plan so that the consultant would actually look at best practices and effectively offer up a solution on kind of a policy, and at the same time they would recommend, given that they're doing this, also highlight all the road sections that policy would pertain to, either immediately or in the future as road sections are being redeveloped or reconstructed.
Okay. And my oh, sorry.
I'm going to go to Councillor Bartley, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All due respect to the consultants from Burnside, which may or may not use Memorial Park or may or not live in the municipality of Meaford, can we as council direct Burnside to take heed of what's come forward from AMP and put it into their projections before they come back with a plan?
Through your worship, a consultant will consider the comments. If they weren't considering the comments, they wouldn't be doing their job. I'll be honest, these comments that we've heard were also the comments that we heard very loud and clear before the deadline came. So I would say that these comments aren't surprising. It's what Burnside was provided beforehand. We've heard a lot of maintenance issues, and a lot of that will go to both operational and the business plan, which will come after the fact. But I don't think Burnside's definitely will be considering these comments in the go forward.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. At our last council meeting, we had a presentation by two young ladies with young families who live at the top of Miller Street Hill. Basically, they had concerns about Miller Street between the Big Shop Bridge and County Road 12. They mentioned a lot of things, but a couple of things I did pick up on was one that And in particular, this relates to the property at 300 Miller Street. There was hope that a hidden driveway sign could be installed, perhaps near the bottom of the hill, and also for the property on the same side of the road, but closer to County Road 12, where there are a lot of children around there. I was wondering if a children playing sign or something to that effect, how would you go about getting those signs, or at least asking for those signs to be installed? What would be the protocol?
Through your worship, I'll take this just because Tori doesn't understand what our processes are. We don't have children playing signs anywhere in the municipality. I mean, people put up things in front of their own lawns or whatever, which is fine. They're allowed to do that. So we wouldn't put up a children playing sign. Hidden driveway sign, we would put up if staff went out and measured everything, and based on the warrants, there should be a sign put up. So if somebody requested it, we would go out, do the field work, and then if a sign's required, it's required. The whole Miller Street topic, again, would be broached as part of the overall transportation master plan and suggestions. Whatever I say is not going to skew the master plan anyways, but I do know that from staff's perspective, for the last 4 years, we've been trying to find a way internally of delicately bringing forward to council the discussion on the Miller Street Hill. In particular, it is our suggestion that Miller Street should be one-wayed so that you can only go up. It would allow for roadside safety devices to be properly installed, and also some kind of a pedestrian lane as well. But as much as the people living on that road would appreciate it to be one-wayed, the traveling public may not, and this is always the push and pull. There are actually 3, 4, maybe 5 road sections in the urban area that, as staff, we would suggest one-waying because of traffic or safety concerns. So we'll bring those up to the transportation, to the consultant, and they will do the analysis, the traffic analysis, and how it would impact other roads, because that's the issue that we face. As soon as you one-way a street, or some people have said, well, why don't you just block it off at the top of the hill so you can only go that far one way or the other? It would completely cut off traffic. What that then means is you've got 1,500 cars a day that are going to be taking other routes, right? So now it impacts other roads. That's the whole point of doing this master plan, is that they'll run all that data and do their modeling and determine what the best solution is.
Chairman, so then this discussion will not take place until the master plan is presented?
Through your worship, I mean, if somebody made a request with regards to a hidden driveway sign, and I would assume if that means even yourself during this council meeting, then as staff, somebody from the roads department will go out, take those measurements, and if it warrants it, it can be installed. Like I said, we don't do children playing. I guess if it's a decision of council to put up children playing signs, there really is no warrant for it. I mean, if you've got a kid, you can request it. So if we want to have 300 signs put up around the municipality, and if that's council's direction, so be it. Recognize that we then have to do maintenance on those and make sure that they meet retroreflectivity and so on and so forth. So we'll look at the driveway sign for sure. We're not going to look at a children playing sign unless it's directed as council, because you'll be inundated with requests for that type of a sign.
Councillor Bell, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to pick up on Councillor Greenfield, and for anybody who's interested, the Farm Safety Association has children playing. We hand them out for free, and you often see us at fall fairs, and you can pick them up, and it's for your private property. You're welcome to assign. I have a question for Legislative Services to Mr. Smith. When we were running for election at a municipal level, we had a lot of rules and restrictions on what we could not do with our signs. And as we're entering into a federal election, inside the municipality of Meaford, I have noted that those vying for a federal seat put their signs right at the intersections. I really wanted my sign at intersections, but I was wondering, what did the municipality of Meaford put forward to candidates running for a federal seat? Did we have a voice and tell them what we wish to have for our rules and what we would like? Did we not have a voice saying that? And if they are breaking those rules, as when we were running for municipal seats, we were told those signs would disappear, and in order to get them back, we'd have to pay a fee to do so. So to Legislative Services, to any and all of my above comments.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. This is actually a really simple one, because when we last passed the election sign bylaw in 2018, we actually made all of the rules that are applicable to municipal election candidates applicable to both provincial and federal election candidates. There are no differences at all, and we have the power to do that within our municipality. Legislative Services staff have sent our election sign bylaw to all candidates running in the federal election. They have been encouraged to abide by those rules, and I have already sent one enforcement letter to one particular candidate that we had had a complaint about. I would encourage council and the public that if there are properties where we have an issue, I need to receive a complaint so we can do something about it, because as with all bylaw enforcement, we're reactive rather than patrolling the municipality looking at election signs.
Thanks, Matt. Councillor Greenfield first, and then Councillor Bartley.
I think
You're
Mr.
good.
Chapman has helped me out along with
Okay.
Councillor Bell.
All right.
Thank you.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and sorry, Harley, I'm going to bring it up again. Miller Street, I'm not an engineer by any means, but there's no room for a sidewalk on either side. I spent a lot of time over there trying to deduct what to do. So I would back Harley's comment about signage and or even a speed road reduction. I don't know if you could go down to 30 on that hill. That's tight on that hill. You can't put a sidewalk in, I understand that. I think right now we should do something with signage, and I'll back Harley if he wants to bring that forward later. Thank you.
Matt, did you want to respond to that? No? Okay, just in terms of, just remember.
Project is done, will be fully used up, and we will be over the contingency amount. Realistically, the reason for being over the contingency amount is probably plus or minus going to be $50,000 to $60,000, which is all of the costs, differential for extra work for having to do all the switchovers of the street lights, and conduit and everything else that wasn't originally included because of the changes to the lights once we got in there and realized that we couldn't use the existing lights. That was brought up at council many months ago. Other than that, the contractor is not coming back to us for extra costs because it's extended in timeline by any means.
And if I may, because I understand if they are late in delivering a project, that there was to be more or less a fine to them. So where are we incurring any fines to the company for being so late?
Through your worship, no, we're not. There are weather delays. The rest of the delays really have nothing to do with the contractor. It's just because of unforeseen, we cannot penalize the contractor for stormwater and water main issues that were uncovered after the fact once the hole was opened up and things had to be redesigned. It's not the contractor's fault that we came across those issues.
Councillor Kentner.
Yes, I just would like to go back to Miller Street. I think that the deputation we had at the last meeting really underlined the likely possibility of a dreadful accident there in the foreseeable future. It's partly because there's a lot more traffic because of the bridge being out, but at the end of the day, it's a bypass of Meaford, and people are using it a lot for that purpose. And in terms of this traffic study, so that we can determine, I think that maybe the one-way traffic, which would provide then for a sidewalk, would make a lot of sense. Try and prioritize it today.
That. We'll move on. Seeing none, we'll move on then to the consent agenda. We have a large number to be considered under the consent agenda. CAO 2019-17 is repealing Resolution 1009-2015. B, Bylaw 2019-70 is a bylaw to prescribe standards for the maintenance and occupancy of property. C is Bylaw 2019-71 is a cost of living adjustment policy. D is Bylaw 2019-72 is a tax increase forgiveness program. COR 2019-04 is a St. Vincent Park to complete an overall park design plan at St. Vincent Park. 2019-70 consent agreement pertaining to concession 11 Park Lot 9 reference plan 16R4477 Part 2. Are there any of those that council wishes to pull? B? Okay. Councillor Bartley?
C and E.
Okay. Seeing no further, can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for A and F? Councillor Bartley and Councillor Kentner. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, moving back to B, Bylaw 2019-70, the Property Standards Bylaw. Councillor Kent. Put on the table
Just
for discussion.
please.
And a seconder, Councillor Bell. Okay, and you had a question.
Well, I did visit with staff last week to just discuss a lot of typos in that particular bylaw, which if it does need to be cleaned up so that it makes sense. But my concern, I'd like some discussion around the table about the fact that if we have a staff of 2 in the bylaw department, but still have to have a written complaint to generate any activity at all, and given that all of us, have an arm's length list of teeth into this bylaw at the same time as we're passing it.
Sorry to hear that the councillor considers that there are typos in this. This has been reviewed by 6 or 7 members of staff. I would encourage council strongly that if you have issues like that, then please tell me about them before we get to this table. So, being said, council has previously dealt necessary because of things like typos, and they, in terms of how we do enforcement, this bylaw has the teeth that it is able to have. It is a property standards bylaw. It's been looked at by a property standards paralegal. It's been looked at by, or similar bylaws have been looked at by lawyers in other communities that we work quite closely with. The issue isn't about the teeth of the bylaw. Enforcement. Then that isn't for this conversation. That's a notice of motion about how we deal with bylaw enforcement.
Thank you for that, Matt. Councillor Bell.
A lot. I'm just going to pick on one, just as an example of what residents can do. And on page 38 of our total report, I just want to act on 2.14. And the main heading there is derelict vehicles. And if persons are one where they are keeping the vehicle they have restored and so on, is it the best interest of our residents to have it out of sight hit the road again, and I don't like looking at it, what would, just in its principle, with folks who have, say, several vehicles, derelict vehicles, what would be a logical, good neighbor aspect without getting our bylaw folks involved?
Through your worship, when we talk about derelict vehicles, we talk about ones that are inoperative and are not really being worked on in a state of disrepair or unsightly and so on and so forth. I don't believe that we would consider something that was being actively worked on to be improved as being derelict, but I would also imagine that anybody who is a collector of those probably only has one that's being worked on at a time and doesn't have 7 or 8 strewn around their yard in various states of disrepair. Having said that, yes, because we work on a reactive basis and we are complaint driven, if you are being good neighbours and keeping your yards in good shape and are not impinging on your neighbours, then we're unlikely to get complaints about it.
Okay.
I wonder, Matt, if we could just add to that, and our bylaw officers are work truly under the compliance mode. And so if there is a complaint, I think probably one of the first things would happen would be a visit to suggest some alternatives, i.e. Temporary shelter or something for those derelict vehicles that are out of sight, out of mind. I think that is the way that our bylaw officers work. Councillor Bell?
Not to cut you off when you're thinking, Madam Mayor, appreciate the opportunity to speak again. One of the things about our bylaw personnel, they've been at this council and presented themselves to us, and they're great people. One of the things that I think that I've heard from some businesses recently is that the bylaw personnel will leave a notice on a person's business. And I think that this municipality has got a good heart. I do. And to that end, I know that doing the job of a bylaw officer can be tough. I've never walked in the shoes of a bylaw officer, but I can well imagine it's tough. And I think that sometimes we miss an opportunity and just say, I see what you're doing. There's a bylaw. What would you like to do? Do you need me to leave you a letter? And I think a lot of times, maybe not to say the names of the bylaw officers, I know that they have a great willingness to serve this community and serve it very well. And I know that the safety and the protection of all people is paramount. I know that. But I think there's opportunities sometimes just to go in and persons, their homes or businesses, just have that conversation before they get a sticky note. Can I just say that?
Through your worship, I would say probably on 95% of occasions our bylaw officers do meet with the people involved before anything is put into writing. There may be some occasions where that is not true, but I don't get that reported to me because I trust in the competence and the training of our bylaw officers. And there are some times when something in writing is required, particularly, for instance, if they've visited a property 3 times and not managed to find anybody. We still have to get that message across when there may be nobody there. I'd encourage council that if you're hearing things like this, tell us so that we can try and tell you what has happened, because inevitably bylaw enforcement is something that has multiple sides to every story. And there are complainants, there are respondents, and there's staff that are trying to work their way through this in a way that doesn't cause us problems with our residents, but also solve some of our community problems. It's probably the most challenging job we have in the municipality. So please talk to us about individual cases, because our officers do work on a compliance model. They talk to people. In fact, we would do a lot more enforcement if we didn't talk to people. We talk about not having enough teeth in order to do the things that meet the long list. It's because we spend a lot of time dealing with these issues rather than just issuing orders. The reason that we haven't had a property standards and licensing committee, we work with property owners to get them to comply rather than just slapping orders on a property as soon as a complaint is made.
Does
Thanks for that, Matt. Much more eloquent than what I was trying to say, but that's exactly the message. Thank you. All in favor of this as presented, and that is carried. C, bylaw 2019-71, the cost of living adjustment policy. Councillor Bartley, I think you wanted to move that, bring that forward.
Yes, I
And
do.
could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Vickers. And your question or your comment?
My comment is, I like the way it's put together. I agree with the how you're going to come up with that figure. As long as it's to put that figure into the opening budget, and it is not binding till the end of the budget process, is all I want to make sure. It doesn't say it in there. So if we pass this today, 2.1 is 2.1, and we can't play with that in the budget process. Is not where I want to go with that.
This would be a policy of council. No policies of council are binding on council. The budget decision is your final decision, and you will be able to go through that process in the normal way. This simply gives staff your preference of how this is done.
Okay. With that, I'll call a question. All in favor of accepting that, and that is carried. And the last one is COR 2019-04, the St. Vincent Park improvements. And that was you too, Councillor Bartley?
Yes, I'd like to move that.
And a seconder for that, please, Councillor Greenfield. Okay, Steve?
My question is, this is a very small park. We're not doing Canada's Wonderland here. I'm wondering, with the amount of staff, I mean professional staff we have, could we not come up with a plan on a small park like this without using a consultant? I just wondered if that could happen. Is that a possibility?
Through your worship, no.
Okay.
So I mean, the long-winded answer is that if we felt as though we could do it, you wouldn't have this report in front of you right now. We are not engineers when it comes to making sure that the traffic is, or that the parking is appropriate for the overall capacity of the site. We do have drainage issues in there because there are wet areas. We do not know how or where to appropriately place the pad that would have to be constructed down into that space to make sure that it meets accessibility, compliance, so on and so forth. So that, I mean, we're looking for a longer-term vision for this park. And again, as part of all this process, and as you've heard earlier today, the public likes to be involved in the planning of these spaces. So having an independent third-party consultant helps in that process, because it's not just about appearance, it's the reality that staff is not trying to drive the bus one way or another, that it's a consultant is taking an open-minded approach to this to try and come up with the best possible solution. And I would say it's not a small piece of property either. There is more waterfront on this piece of property than there is at Memorial Park, which everybody's fighting, you know, frantically for to get their little piece of. So, you know, maybe if we can improve this park properly and market it well, it will actually take pressure off of other areas that we've got.
Thank you. I know we're not going to play with the shoreline. We're just basically doing an entrance in a parking lot. Now, having said that, we like to listen to what the public says. What I heard from the public that day was, please don't spend money on a consultant, and we don't need more parking. So I was just trying to go down that road. Having said that, if we get a consultant's report back on what we can do with this park, do we have the money to do what we want to do with that park?
Through your worship, we will continue to have available funds over the next years and decades with regards to parkland dedication as developments happen. So there's money there. I would assume that, you know, depending on the priorities of council and I guess the community at large, depending on what the outcome of this new legislation with regards to the development charges is, certainly this park could form part of that if those are eligible costs. But I don't know where that stuff's going right now with the the DC world heads upside down. So there will be money. It just might take 10, 15, 20 years to fully implement the plan. But I mean, we work long-term as an organization anyway, so it really doesn't matter.
Thank you.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Chapman, just following up on the plan by Darcy, by using a consultant. AODA, but if things come through for agriculture grants, will that put us in a better position to apply?
I certainly don't think it would hurt, and specifically if it's for things like accessibility upgrades, they can be used and it can be fully accessible. Absolutely would probably put us above other projects, you know, in trying to get them.
Where to spend money on consultants and where not to spend money on consultants. And it does, you know, and maybe it's just my own personal opinion, it does seem to be a bit of a yin and a yang. What do you do? So, you know, I agree, and I can see where you're coming from. And I was hoping with tenure and maybe some age, that would become easier to figure out where to consultants. So apparently it's not. So it's just something that I struggle with also. So those are my comments.
Okay, seeing Councillor Greenfield.
Not to prolong this, but I think if
Yes,
we look at this is something like 315 feet of Georgian Bay shoreline. If I remember correctly, there were originally 3 lots involved here, 3 separate lots. So we're looking at a very expensive piece of property, a very valuable piece of property. A 100-foot lot on Georgian Bay today, I wouldn't even estimate the price of it. So it's
Let's do it right.
it's, you know, if you take it that way, it's worth spending some money.
Going forward, and that is carried. Okay, we're moving into bylaw 2019-74 and the zoning bylaw amendment at 323 Miller Street. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Bell, Councillor Bartley. And who do we have here? Liz. You were hiding behind the corner there.
I just wanted to note that if there are any questions with respect to the staff report, I'd be happy to address those. Staff are recommending approval of the zoning bylaw amendment to implement the accessory apartment unit and home occupation within the proposed detached accessory building. And so I know I provided you lots of wonderful reading material, so I'm happy to speak to that if there are questions.
Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and I too would like to see these folks move forward with everything that they'd like to do, and can support this. I want to ask a question to you. It's page 8 of 9, and it has to do with the topic of consultation and communications. And the first line says that notice has been circulated in a manner prescribed by the Planning Act to the following. And fellow councillors, when we were in our meeting about economic development, I made a passing comment at that meeting that sometimes you can read a report where there's 12 agencies that get notification. In this case, there's 14. So we have a property which is located right inside the town of Meaford, and yet we have sent out notification to the military base to have a comment on it, and to the City of Owen Sound, and also the ITF, you know. Why, Liz, do we send out a notification, in particular, a property in the heart of the town of Meaford, and ask to say the City of Owen Sound to make comment, but not the Blue Mountains and Chatsworth or any other municipality that touches us? Because if they're on the list, they're going to get contacted, and they have an opportunity to talk about it and send a report. To me, it looks like it's unnecessary. So with it stating the Planning Act, what have I asked you?
Yeah, through your worship, I can speak to particularly the City of Owen Sound one. Under the Planning Act, we are required to give notice to adjacent municipalities if they fall within a kilometer of any amendment. Obviously, this is well beyond the kilometer. However, we did receive special notification from the City of Owen Sound that they want to receive notification of all of our applications. So we, in accordance with the Planning Act, have to provide them with that notification, and that would apply to some of the other people. So,
through you, with respect to the military training facility, the rule of thumb that we follow there is that anything adjacent to or north of Highway 26 is typically circulated to them. This one's, I guess, south of, but on the way kind of out of town, and so I think that it's been picked up within that circulation just because it is kind of north of the town. With respect to intertownship, I think we generally circulate the fire departments, and so those are just picked up in the usual circulation list that we notify the fire departments. A lot of the other ones are prescribed, so the Planning Act goes into detail in terms of, for example, Union Gas and the school boards, for example. Those are prescribed by the Planning Act. With respect to those adjacent municipalities, there typically are distance circulations that apply unless there has been a request otherwise. Yeah.
So we can see, fellow councillors, that, I mean, the Niagara Escarpment is not on this because this property is not involved with Niagara Escarpment, but the list can most certainly be very long and quite distinguished. And I just wanted to know, when folks try to do something and move forward, how vast that list can be. And I know in the Planning Act you're covering ourselves as a municipality, and I wondered why, for instance, only Owen Sound had comment, we didn't talk about the Blue Mountains. So if they don't want to know, we don't have to tell them. Is that what you're saying?
Generally, yes, if it's not prescribed. For your information, so for the town of Blue Mountains, they've requested circulation if property falls within 2 kilometers of their boundary. So whereas the Act generally stipulates 1 kilometer, Blue Mountains has asked for 2 kilometers. So we do have the ability to exercise that same request to other municipalities if that was ever of interest as well.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I find it disturbing that we have to let Owen Sound know about everything we're doing. Do we ask for their planning act?
through your worship, we only go by the 1 kilometer, so we get notification of anything that happens in the city of Owen Sound within 1 kilometer of our boundary. We haven't exercised any greater because we did not see a need.
Can you tell me the need for Owen Sound to know what we're doing on Miller Street?
Through your worship, I guess Owen Sound would have to be asked why they want that larger circulation.
I shall do that. So what is the distance from this Miller Street home that you send notification out? What is the distance?
So adjacent property owners within 120 meters.
120 meters. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kentner.
Clarification, if Owen Sound requests that, the Planning Act requires it. Well, I think it should at least be reciprocal, except I don't know why you'd want all that mail.
Okay, any other questions for Liz? I'll call a question. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you, Liz. And this next one is Bylaw 2019-75 and COM 2019-05, the Public Transit Infrastructure Funding. I have a mover and a seconder. Please put that on the table. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Vickers. Okay. Matt, over to you.
Thank you. This is quite a silly one, really. The Ministry of Transportation have requested that we pass another bylaw for a grant that we received 2.5 years ago because they want to add performance metrics into the agreement and don't feel like they've got the power to do that without us having a separate bylaw because the bylaw doesn't reference amending agreements. We think that they've probably been undergoing an audit, and so they realised there was a missing word or two and have come back to us now.
Housekeeping detail. Any questions? All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And I have a mover and a seconder, please, to go into Committee of the Whole. Councillor Kentner, Deputy Mayor. All in favor? Okay. And the first one off the mark is the CAO 2019-19 position creation for a Legislative Services Assistant and Manager of Strategic Initiatives. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table? Deputy Mayor and Councillor Bell. And over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will speak to the Manager of Strategic Initiatives and then highlight a bit of the importance of legislative services, and then I'll let Matt speak to any more details on the legislative services component. So with regard to the Manager of Strategic Initiatives, this position is intended to replace the Economic Development Officer, Tourism Officer, a position mostly to deal with, head up the communications and marketing staff that we do have within the municipality to ensure coordination from that aspect, as well as dealing with some strategic initiatives that come forward with council, as well as working with myself as the lead on delivering on the pending economic development initiatives that will come forward under the economic development strategy. So that's the rationale between for the Manager of Strategic Initiatives. Basically, it's just a replacement position from another position going forward. With regard to legislative services, we've had, if we go back a few years, we had a staff member who was dedicated to file management. It was an issue that came forward in the last operational review in 2010 when I was here as something we needed to focus on. So we did provide that focus. However, we've gotten away from that focus, and I'm a bit concerned with the file management. I think we need to get back into prioritizing that and go forward, and that would be one of the key roles for this position, as well as providing administrative support to the directors, which we currently do not have any dedicated administrative support for the directors and myself. I'll turn it over to Matt if he wants to add anything more on the legislative services side.
Thanks, Rob. Really to add more of the same, in that this position in some form or other has existed in different ways, but we went from having one person to do this to having half a person to do this to now having no persons to do this because of some of the changes internally, particularly around resourcing the fire and bylaw services team better with administrative assistants following the master fire plan, and some of the other changes around the time of the last election in 2014. From my point of view, with expanded portfolios for the directors, and certainly I feel some of the pressure of those expanded portfolios. Some of my clerking duties have to go to the deputy clerk. The deputy clerk already has a fulsome job, so some of her duties has to go somewhere, and this is the job where that goes to.
Thank you, Matt. Questions? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. And so can we divide this discussion into two parts then in relation to each position? Because I fully support the initial request for a replacement for Economic Development Officer and a Manager of Council Strategic Initiatives. I support that. So I don't know how you want to manage that, Your Worship.
Well, we can split it if you wish.
Yes. And I'd like to speak, though, to the second position. To begin with, a question. Are we expecting Ms. Wilton-Segal to return to Meaford?
Absolutely. She's currently on maternity leave and will be returning very shortly.
Okay, that was kind of what I wondered, because I guess from council's perspective, although I can only speak from my own chair, we've done a bit of hiring lately, and I'm just getting concerned about adding more and more positions as we head into budget discussions. And recognizing the increase that we're looking at. So I'm just looking forward to hearing from my fellow councillors around the table about their thought on adding another number.
Anything further? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So with the departure of one position and the acquisition of another, as it was brought forward in the the rescinding of the bylaw that we had a few years ago, and as the CAO asking for this position and creating a new title of a different portfolio, I also have questions that were more heading towards the legislative services side. And so really when that got added in the package here to say that they're also going to be working with that, but also doing something with the economic development and that higher profile of what that will do, I was also concerned with the hiring of more personnel. And it was as simple as that. And I'm glad that the deputy mayor asked about, Margaret Segal coming back again. Of course, we did not know. Now we've got that answer. And to me, I would like to hear again from the CAO on this position to where the energy of this individual will really, really be focused. I know you gave an opening comment on that, but I can see the legislative services side, and maybe I'm wrong, supporting you, Mr. Smith, when the other person comes back. So.
If I'll just leap in before Rob can. I should make clear, there was never any question about our existing deputy clerk returning to the role. She is on maternity leave. That is a statutory thing. She'll be back as soon as her new child is a year old, and that happens to be on October the 1st. So that deputy clerk position stays exactly the same in that it exists and it will continue to exist. In 2014, the Legislative Services Department had a clerk, a deputy clerk, and a records management coordinator. And at that time, the clerk had responsibility solely for legislative services and for bylaw enforcement. When I was appointed in early 2017, the Legislative Services Division had a clerk, a deputy clerk, and half of the Legislative and Protective Services coordinator. At that time, the clerk had responsibility for legislative services and bylaw enforcement. As of today, the Legislative Services Division has the clerk and has a council and committee coordinator covering for the deputy clerk. And the clerk has responsibility for legislative services, bylaw enforcement, fire services, Meaford Hall, the museum and recreation programme, including the Blue Dolphin Pool. So we have gone from, in effect, 2.8 full-time equivalents to approximately 1.25. That's why we need support, because none of the things that have to be done in legislative services have changed. We still have to do the records management, we still have to do accessibility, we still have to deal with council and committee services, we still have to deal with MFIPA, the legal and property portfolio that I share with my colleagues in planning. There is extensive work that has to be done, and our staff are completely maxed out, and I will include myself in that.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So with the deputy clerk returning, the present deputy clerk would be returning to her original job, or?
Yes.
So this would be in addition to that?
Yes, because we currently have a temporary person filling Ms McCullough's role while she's assisting legislative services.
Now, like I said before, I'm totally against hiring more staff, but I've also said that the 4 people in front of me, or 3 of them, I don't know Tori yet, I trust 100%. And when Rob looks me in the eye and says he needs another staff, I can't deny it. I have to go with it. I don't think he's pulling the wool over my eyes, and so I will support this. Thank you.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Some people may remember in the past I've been hesitant to support additional staff members. However, I truly believe that Mr. Armstrong has thought this out very well. I think he has presented his case very well, and I'm quite willing to support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greenfield. Anything further? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. It seems there's considerable peer pressure around the table today, and certainly I concur. Nothing but respect and trust in Mr. Armstrong and the senior staff here before us. So if they are telling us the details of why they need this position, I have a better understanding of the request, I guess, at this time, and will raise my hand for the 2 positions.
Thank you. Anything further before I call the question? And we have had a request to split it. Do you still want to split it, or can we do them both together? All right, we'll go to, I'll ask call the question then for supporting these 2 positions. Legislative Services Assistant and a Manager of Strategic Initiatives. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Moving on to Corporate Services, COR 2019-05, the 2020 Budget Framework. Before we get into this, do we need a quick break? Yes? Yes? I need a quick break. Need to refill my water. 3 minutes, yeah, okay. Could I have a mover to put COR 2019-05, our 2020 Budget Framework, on the table, please? Councillor Bell, Councillor Greenfield. And here we go. Over to you, Mr. Chapman.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship.
Report.
Favorite time of year? Only because I get to bring forward the report that has the longest recommendation possible annually in it. A nice little 11-parter, so we'll go through each one of them very quickly. We are looking for direction from council. This is very repetitious from the last 4 years plus 2020 now, so 5 years the budget reports look very similar. 2.06% is a starting for the draft operating budget, and that coincides with the COLA policy that was just recently adopted by council as a starting point. 1% for roads, 1% for bridges, 0.5% for facilities. Add that all up, it makes 4.56%. So that's what we're asking at this stage of the game as a starting point for staff to keep moving forward. The 2.06% again would be our baseline for the COLA increase for staff wages. For a 4-year period, we took assessment growth and dumped that into an infrastructure reserve. Last year, we changed course and used it to offset the tax rate increase. We're again, as staff, saying put it back into the general infrastructure reserve. I mean, we've got lots of infrastructure needs. You never know when government grants are going to come up. This would be a good pot of money to put in there. It works out to, we're estimating about, right now impact is assuming 1.7% in real growth. So we would be well north of $200,000 that would be put into that general infrastructure reserve for future use. We also have one-time federal funding from the gas tax. So we get our normal federal gas tax. In 2019, the Liberal government doubled that gas tax amount. Then on top of that, because AMO is the one who administers the Ontario portion, and they get a certain little cut for doing the administration, but then money also sits in their bank account until the quarterly allocations come out. So they do an accounting on this every few years. They did one for the end of 2018. It showed that there was a slight surplus in the fund, so then they redistribute that $12 million surplus to all the local municipalities. So all in all, we're looking at about $365,000 in gas tax funds. From staff's perspective, so Part 8 and Part 9 of the recommendation deal with that. The first one is allocating $175,000 towards the reconstruction and resurfacing of the Euphrasia St. Vincent town line between 7th Line and Grey Road 7. So for those of you on council, from the prior term, you'll remember that a couple years ago, that road was in very bad shape. It was surface treated, but it was in extremely bad shape, and we were spending literally $10,000, $20,000 a year on cold patch and staff time, just going out and trying to continually fill the potholes. So the decision was made at that time, which was the same time that we did Storybook Park as well, and the 23rd Side Road, and we pulverized that and just turned it back to gravel. Grey Highlands has been, their staff and council have been dealing with a lot of concerns from the folks on their side of the border, wishing for this road to be resurfaced again. So this would make good on our 50% share on that road section of bringing it back to a hard surface road. We're then suggesting that with the remaining money from this pot, $185,000, would go towards implementation of the Memorial Park Master Plan, specifically as it relates to break wall and stormwater and erosion issues. So it wouldn't be used for improvements to the park I mean, as far as the RV sites are concerned or anything else. This is really about breakwall erosion and stormwater issues, because I'm sure that, you know, the overall park plan will come back with billions of dollars in needs over the next, you know, 25 years. This really is more about making sure that there's a pot of money for us to use to deal with immediate issues that are going to come out of this master plan. And lastly, we've also had to some surpluses over the last 3 years, 2016, 2017, and 2018, and portions of those have been allocated to a number of different projects. But what we're still left with was a small amount left from 2016 and 2017, and then the 2018 surplus that hasn't been allocated yet. This all comes together and is just about $308,000. As staff, we're suggesting that that go towards reducing the debt for the library project. And lastly, we're also suggesting, just so that it gets buttoned up and done for the end of this year as well, that any surplus from 2019 would also go towards that same reduction in debt for the new library. With that, I won't go through all the data that's in the report. I'll just open it up for council questions.
Questions? Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Your Worship, thank you. And I must say, Darcy, that I support certainly the bulk of what's being proposed here, and glad to see, you know, continuing with the 1%, 1%, 0.5%. And I know we'll have a discussion about salary increases as we go forward. My one question was in relation to allocating surpluses to the library. You mentioned there in the report increased budget expenses, and I just wanted to clarify if there was something above and beyond the $7 million that we're already anticipating, or you're just reflecting the difference that got us up to the $7 million where we are now.
Through your worship, yeah, it was just a reflection of the fact that we had gone from that 5.5 million to that $7 million number. So, you know, council at the time, although you voted unanimously, I know that there was, you know, certainly concern about it around the table, and without knowing where extra money could come from, council kind of laid the gauntlet down to staff to find extra money to help reduce the debt. So this is why we made this suggestion through this report, was to use the surpluses to help offset those extra costs. So we're still in line at the $7 million. We're not expecting any overages, but it was already $1.5 million over what was planned before.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thanks, Darcy. This is a great start. I don't even think we'll need 2 days this year. Having said that, I was under the impression that we already gave 216 and 217's money to infrastructure. I thought we cleared out them accounts and sent it to infrastructure. I remember that, and I guess I'm wrong.
Through your worship, we have allocated $76,000 towards reconstructing Forest Side Road, so Frogs Hollow, because that was just a top-up amount that we needed. And about $407,000 went to concession A. Council also previously allocated $257,000 to the library project. This was a couple years ago. So that's everything that's been allocated. So we had, you know, give or take, just about $1.05 million, and we've allocated $750,000. So there's about $300,000 that's still left. Now, the biggest share of that was from the 2018 surplus that just hasn't been dealt with. But there was a small amount that was left over from 2016, so I just tried to package it all together so council could make one decision on our surplus as a total, instead of, you know, having to do separate resolutions for each component of 16, 17, and 18. That's
great, because that's found money in my mind, because I thought we'd already done that. One more question, if I may. It states in last year's projections that we were going to have a 6.14 increase this year. And right now it hasn't happened. Now in your projections, we've got an 8.7 next year. Is this a scare tactic, or what's going on here?
Well, through your worship, I think based on the appendix that's in the report, I mean, we're still going to have work to do to try and get to 2.06%. You know, the body of the report talks about a number of kind of, as much as I can say, fixed costs, you know, increases in insurance, CPP, EI, benefits, that kind of stuff. You know, you do add in the COLA, which we do have some control over, policing costs, so on and so forth. That all adds up to $422,000, right? 2% is only about 290 grand. So we're already, you know, $130,000 in the hole, almost 1% in the hole to begin with. So that means, you know, if council is expecting us to actually come in at that 2.06%, as staff, we either have to find ways to cut costs or to come up with new revenues just to offset the $130,000. And that's in those known costs. That doesn't include inflation on everything else. We have yet to look at utilities or even the cost of all of our office supplies. It's like, how much have pen and paper gone up, right? So it's going to be a tough haul as it is. But that budget sheet that was appended to the report, the reason that we were looking at such a high number was not so much because of the operating, it was because of the capital increase. And part of that is twofold. It's simply, you know, year over year, we never have enough money for capital. So we keep backing off some of our work. And this is just trying to illustrate kind of that bottling up of all those projects that really should have been done before. If we actually tried to do all the projects as and when they should be done now, you'd be looking at a lot more than just a 2.5% increase in the capital. The other thing is that this reflects the fact that last year council made the decision to effectively reduce the capital budget by a portion of the money when you guys allocated or rejigged the replacement of the rubber tire backhoe. So that took $100,000 out of future capital. So that all compounds, and that's why we were looking at a larger number. I mean, we're going to have work to do on the operating, but really the pressure is always going to come from the capital.
Thank you, sir, and good luck.
Councillor Vickers.
Through your worship, so again, I agree with this. You know, it's a great start. It's number 3, and those two words in it. The report has, of the infrastructure's report preservation model. So is this saying that if we pass the budget as is, or even this framework, that the preservation model will continue? And I guess it's maybe an unfair question to ask Tori about in her early stages of her time here, but I'm still concerned. I know we had the planning session back there in the winter time, and the gentleman came to talk to us about how the preservation model works. I still struggle with it. The road, some of the work that was done this year between the 11th and I think it's called the 12th line. Again, I look at that road and it's in good shape. You know, it all of a sudden gets a new top put on it. That money's gone from capital that can never be brought back. You know, I know you don't like deferring anything through the roads to you, Darcy, but I still struggle with the theory behind the preservation model. Just because it seems like we're leaving the worst roads to just completely deteriorate, and we've seen that with Frogs Hollow and with Concession A. And I think there is another road that must be in bad shape with the emails that are coming through. And you know, it works well for the good roads, but it's the ones that aren't on the good roads that completely suffer. And you know, you could look at Frogs Hollow this summer, and the only thing you can say about that road is at least it wasn't dusty, because you know there is a hard top on it. As far as the road having let it go as far as it did, and I think if you went back to the preservation model, that road still wouldn't be fixed for another couple of years if we followed that preservation model by the letter of the law.
I'm going to leap in on this one because it's got more of a procedural one in terms of what you're approving or what you're not. Approving this resolution doesn't tie you into the preservation model in the long term. It ties you in, doesn't even tie you into this, but it gives staff direction to include a 1% additional tax levy into the budget for roads capital funding. Right now, that will be allocated based on the preservation model, because that's been the instruction of council. But if council wanted to change that allocation model in the future, then the money at least would be there, because while I'm not a roads person, I can pretty much guarantee you'd need at least that amount of money to be able to do anything different as well.
Yes, through your worship, I think to the question on the preservation model, by this time next year, we won't be calling it a preservation model because we're going through the process right now with the street scan process to come up with a new data set. So, you know, maybe preservation model was the wrong terminology, right? But at the end of the day, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to answer it immediately because I think I already know the answer. All right. So, what does council and the public actually want with your roads? Right. What you want with your roads is the best possible ride quality on those roads overall in a transportation network, and that's really what we're working with. People don't care whether the trees are growing in too much and it makes it hard to do winter control, or if the ditches don't run water, or if the base is no good. They don't even care about the type of road surface. What they care about is when they're driving down the road, is it a smooth ride or is it littered with potholes, right? That's what the public cares about. That's what this new process is going to do. It looks at pavement condition index. So it's about, you know, pavement condition index really means ride quality. So it rates everything from 100 down to 0. Everything from 70 up is in fair, good, or excellent condition. And everything below 70 starts to go poor, bad, extremely bad. I wish I don't ever want to live on this road kind of bad. So at the end of the day, we've just got this data last week. We have a lot of playing around to do with it, but I can tell you one thing, and I'm going to tie this back into the preservation model, unfortunately. Right now, the data would show that our PCI is 66. So 70 and up is fair to good to excellent. So we are just slightly below fair, right? So really as council, the question we are going to ask you moving forward is, what do you want the overall transportation network score to be at, right? Do you want it to be at 60, 70, 80, 90? And there are consequences to that. So some roads are going to be bad, some roads are going to be good. But let's say it's not about now about ride quality or overall transportation. What you want to do is just fix the bad roads, right? We've already played with the model. I can take a 10-year capital plan that we've got right now, increase it by that 1% every year over the next 10 years, and always tick off the worst roads, right? Our PCI will go from 66 to 58. So there are always going to be some bad roads, but it's about how we prioritize and how we best use that money, right? Because crack sealing is $1 for every $100 that asphalt is. So you do the crack sealing so that the road doesn't crack, so that you don't have to replace the surface. Because replacing the surface is $10 for every $100 to completely reconstruct. But if you don't do the crack sealing, it's still better to do the resurfacing versus having to always do the reconstruction. So we're going to bring the model forward to you guys once we get it all figured out. It's going to still take a couple months because we actually have to link up all the road sections to ArcGIS data and make sure that the financials work right. And we can like literally play right here. It'll be all on your screens. You'll be able to see it. And we can choose different roads that we want to do. And then that over long term will affect the overall pavement condition index. But the first thing that we want council to do is understand PCI and then set what your priority is for the community as a whole. As far as the level of service, that's what we keep talking about, the level of service for. What do you want the overall level of service to be at? And then from there, if you want it to, if we're at 66 right now, and you want it to go to 75, how much money do we need to invest between now and the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years to get us to that level? Because it's certainly not going to happen in the matter of 1 year.
Darcy, how is that going to impact the transportation master plan that is coming when you're looking at this in isolation, the street scan?
Well, the intention of the transportation master plan really is to look at traffic flow overall, to look at where we would have to make improvements to the overall transportation network. So, right now, this plan, like what we've got in the model through the street scan, is that if it's a gravel road, it stays a gravel road. If it's surface treatment, stays surface treatment. Asphalt stays asphalt. The whole point of the transportation master plan will be to look at overall traffic flow to say, okay, right now you've got a gravel road, but you've got, a lot of heavy truck traffic on it, and a fair amount of regular vehicle traffic on it, that really should be upgraded to a hard surface road because of the traffic type on it. So now you're going to have to compound all of those things into the model as well. So it just means more money.
Okay, we've got a list here, guys, just not got your down here. So, Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Chapman, for and all staff for bringing this first draft forward. I hope that our council and the media, first of all, emphasize this recommendation says not to exceed 4.56. I think that's very important because to me that suggests, perhaps there are chances of lightening this load. You mentioned on page 2 of the report the $420,000 of pretty well guaranteed increases that we're going to be looking at, and they're good to know. I'm hoping maybe somewhere along the line staff might have a list of potential savings that we could take a look at. I know that's going to be a harder list to comprise than what this one is, but I don't think we should give up looking at areas, if they do exist, and perhaps they do, where we could save some money. I guess when I first read the 4.56, I had to ask myself, we need to ask our residents if they believe their services will be 4.56 better in 2020 than they were in 2019. And I think we'd get some very, very interesting answers if indeed we come in at 4.56. This is going to be a struggle. There are no enhancements. And at 4.56, I honestly don't see how we can consider any enhancements. I think perhaps we could. It's very, very early, too early, but maybe 4.5 may be realistic. Let's try to keep it that way. Again, if there are any savings that can be realized, I'd like to investigate them. Then perhaps we could have some enhancements to kind of a bit of a trade-off. Anyway, that's all I need to say for now, Your Worship.
Through Your Worship, might I just mention a couple things to Councillor Greenfield's questions or comments? So firstly, as staff, through this whole process, we will constantly be looking at new revenues and reductions in costs that do not affect the level of service. So we will bring forward a budget, fingers crossed, toes crossed, everything that fits within this 4.56%. But wherever our draft of the budget lands, it will land based on doing business the same way that we do right now, without any changes to the level of service. Because that is a discussion of council. So if the budget comes in at 2% and you guys want it to be higher because you want to increase levels of service, that's for council's decision. Subsequently, if the first draft of the budget comes in at 8%, because that's really the best that we can do without changing levels of service, that's what it's going to come in at. Because as staff, we are not empowered to change the level of service. That will be a discussion of council. On the discussion about, would the public see a 4.5% betterment to the level of service? The first thing that we need to recognize is that 2.06% reflects COLA. So there should be a 2.06% cost increase across the board on average on all of our expenses, because that's what the inflation number is. So just to keep pace with doing business exactly the way we're doing it right now, there should already be a 2% increase because you have control over salaries, but you don't have control over the cost of fuel or electricity. So if we don't increase the budget by 2%, then we're actually going to lose buying power. We're going to lose the ability to maintain the level of service that we got. The other 2.5% has nothing to do with operating. It has nothing to do with the delivery of service. It has everything to do with the capital side of things. So this budget at 4.56% is about maintaining the existing level of service only the way it is right now. And let's hope that we can bring a budget in at that price.
Okay, who do I have? Deputy Mayor first.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next question is relation to policing, and I see the increase is suggested here, $67,000. But I'm thinking that the new Police Services Act is coming before us in January. Do we have any hints at all at this point in time if that's going to change the pricing, the structure in any major way, or are we just kind of going with what we know for now, and how will we deal with that if it
If you
is
know
changed?
that the new Police Services Act is coming into force in January, you know more than I do at this stage, because it still hasn't had the Lieutenant Governor's proclamation at this stage. However, I do not believe that the Act will have any impact in how the OPP does their pricing. We have not been told that there'll be any change in pricing structure.
Through your worship, we're expecting the same pricing structure. And this $61,600 is an anticipation of two factors. So our pricing is based partly on calls for service, but it's also based partly on households. So even though our calls for service have stabilized, and it's on a 4-year average, so even 1 year of peak wouldn't make much of a difference, we know that through the CBAs, what the OPP is getting, and because of that, 90% of their costs are driven by staffing. So we know that there's going to be, a 2 to 2.5% increase in the overall cost of policing just because of salaries. Then on top of that, we have to actually add in the fact that every time we have a new house that gets built in the municipality, it adds to the property count, and that adds to our base billing. So that's how the $61,600 was generated, was partly because of general, back COLA, that 2% magic increase, plus a recognition that we do have development that's happening, we do have houses being built, they're coming onto the books, and it adds to the base of our cost.
Councillor Kentner.
So I also was had flagged paragraph 3, and my point was I have no problem with the increases that we're putting to the levy, but the preservation model. And Mr. Smith said that this is council's prerogative. We don't have to go by the preservation model. But then he also came back and said, you can do that anytime you like. I thought we already did that we had said that we are not going to go by the preservation model in terms of determining what road is next. But not gone
through
there
your
yet,
worship,
eh?
no. Council's given different direction about funding models for the bridge replacements, but no further direction has happened regarding the road structure, so we're still operating under the previous direction of council when the road SODI was adopted.
Okay.
It's through your worship. I can give council comfort so that we don't have to worry about a notice of motion. Not that you guys, you can't have the notice of motion, but we will be developing the 2020 capital budget for roads based on the data that we're getting out of the street scan program, not from the 2014 bridge. So as Matt mentioned, the whole point of this is that it's still to get that 1%. That's the document that we have as the guiding document on the books right now. When we bring forward the street scan data to council, we'll still be saying to adopt this as the new approach and still keep the 1%. It'll just be a different wording that'll be used.
Different name for that.
Yeah.
Okay, and Councillor Vickers next.
So to go back to the preservation model, I'm glad that we're starting to use more information and compiling more information to make better decisions. I hope some common sense would go along with it instead of just using a model of a person that was showing us a little game that reminded me more of a Sims game than it did of actual reality of the area. And I hope you are up for the challenge, and I know you will be. And like I said, let's try and put a little bit of common sense within the whole the road structure, because I realize that councillors and even residents can come and say, this road should be fixed because it's close to me. No, this road should be fixed because it's close to me. So I understand the issues with it. It's just I just see some of the roads being left in such terrible shape that it gets to the point where it's, you know, it's not fair to those people that do live on those roads. So those are just a few of the comments I do have on that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Vickers, and Councillor Bell next.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Mr. Chapman, and to my fellow councillors. The budget is probably one of the most serious issues that we as council members get to address. And to my fellow councillor Bartley, I look forward to that two-day session so we can get into this and have all of the details that we need to know hammered out without the other pressures. And I thank my fellow councillors for, on my motion, doing that unanimously. So I hope, Councillor Bartley, you also dig into this for us, because I know that you've got a keen mind when it comes to the budget, and I look forward to the two-day session.
Just wanted to add one quick comment, and that is once we approve the budget framework, that is just that exactly is the parameters with which the budget is going to be prepared. Each issue, each item will be discussed in its entirety and voted on at the time. So there, just while there is verbiage in here or perhaps, or doesn't mean that that is committed today to that particular item in the budget framework. So just need to, that, I think that was confusing last time, but should be made very clear this time. Anything further? Councillor Greenfield.
Your Worship, one more question for Mr. Chapman. The current ITFD costs, I'm going to throw out a number. I'm not on the board anymore. I'm thinking it's around $250,000 a year we pay for ITFD, just to pick a number. Is there any calculation in 2020 for any change with finances with ITFD? Are we expecting to be that far early next year, or are we still using basically the current?
Through your worship, I think that at this stage of the game, we would still use whatever the board provides to us based on the allocations. I know that we have still been levying their suggested amount for capital, but putting it into our own reserve, and we would probably still do that until this all gets figured out. But I would assume that the overall ITFD costs would go up by that 2 to 2.5%, 3%. That kind of everything else is going to. I wouldn't say that there's going to be any savings in the 2020 budget. We haven't even gotten close to that on negotiations yet.
Might be found money when we get to it at the end. Anything further? Yeah, for sure. Great report. Thank you so much to staff for this initial place to start, and I think that we will have two very interesting discussion days of working through each one of these items. And at this stage, I will call a question. All in favor of accepting this budget framework, and that is carried. Okay, moving on to COR 2019-06, the award of tender for specialized transit system operations. I have a mover and a seconder, please put that on the table. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Bartley. Okay. Darcy, over to you.
Yes, through your worship. We are again here for a purchasing report because it's over $150,000. Given it's not $150,000 annually, but since this was a multi-year tender, the total amount exceeds that $150,000, which is why we require council approval. The other, I guess, smaller part monetarily, maybe more important part from a service perspective, we're also asking council to approve the increase in operating hours from 24 to 28 hours as part of this contract. We've received very good pricing from First Student, who is our current provider. So, ultimately there's not going to be any negative impact to the 2020 budget through this, as any increased cost would be fully funded from gas tax reserve funds anyways. Through this process of specialized transit over the last little while, we've been kind of asking the users of the system, you know, where the goods and the bads are as far as days. People still have not really, you know, cared about the fact that we're only a 4-day service. Monday doesn't seem to be a heavy use day, especially since we've taken it out of the mix. Most people don't care. What people are concerned, or were concerned about, was morning transit, trying to get to appointments earlier, doctors, things like that. So that's why we've set this new contract up. Instead of being a 6-hour-a-day service, it's now 7 hours. We'd add an extra hour of service to the morning so that it kind of meets the needs of the people who are using it and what they've you know, brought forward as suggestions for expansions to the service. Other than that, everything else stays the same. Same bus driver, same company, same dispatch, and we've had a great relationship with First Student, so we're certainly happy with recommending this award.
Thank you, Darcy. Questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, and that is carried. Okay. Okay, moving on to updates from members pointing to committees. First one is County Council, and I will just speak to that briefly. And I'm trying to get to the minutes and the information that was presented, but one of the things I wanted to bring to Council's attention was the County Council had approved a proposal to extend the, for a communications tower that would be appropriate to all of the participating fire halls. And there were 6 proposals that had been, or 6 versions of how this could be enacted, 1 through 6. And County Council had approved version 3 of the proposals that had come forward. The last one, the 6th one, was the ideal proposal that would encompass the ability for the policing to be included in this, and with Gray and Bruce together. The problem with this was that it required additional bandwidth, and for and at the moment the province is not issuing any more of the bandwidth agreements. So the decision from County Council was to accept the 3rd intermediate version of this proposal, with the caveat that at the date in the future that the further bandwidth would be approved by the province, then we could expand into that. So right now, this is just going to be a communication tower that will be applicable to the immediate fire halls in Grey County and Grey Bruce as much as they can, with the option to increase that to fire or to policing as well at a later date. And that's the proposal that has come forward from County. It was accepted. Certainly, it must be able to be integrated into Bruce County, and it must at some point be, the ideal would be to integrate into policing calls for service as well. But the police departments were not engaged by staff in moving this forward, and so at this stage it's best to go with solution number 3, so that the radio frequencies that are controlled now can be sustained, and we'll be looking for more frequencies that the government will be approving at a later date at some point in the future. So that's, I know it's very complicated. It was very complicated for most of us going through, but this was a resolution that had been accepted by a large number of the fire departments, the fire chiefs involved in the discussion. Other than that, I think there was, unless Councillor Kentner, you had attended the county meeting, was there anything that you wanted to bring forward on that?
Just in particular, the report from the medical officer of health
Right.
from the Grey Bruce Health Unit was an extremely encouraging report on the better control of overdosing on some of these narcotics. And he got a lot of credit from council for the initiatives that he's taken.
Great. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you again, Your Worship. A couple of meetings last Tuesday. Grace Auble Conservation Authority directors and staff met with Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority directors and staff in a neutral area, Elmwood, and we had a pretty good discussion concerning the sharing of a CAO for both authorities. A lot of good discussion, quite a bit of a round and round, and certainly no decisions were made. There were a few comments that maybe we should be discussing amalgamation of the two authorities, so that really wasn't what we were there for. But basically, the door has been opened. There has been some discussion, and I'm sure there'll be further comments and ideas coming forward on that suggestion. We also had a library board meeting last Wednesday, and the library board, the Meaford Public Library Board, received and supported the 2020 budget. It calls for an increase, and I won't get into numbers yet, but anyway, the library board is that far along with the 2020 budget. There can be changes, and of course council will have an opportunity to take a look at the numbers. We also did have an in-camera session concerning staff, and all I can say from the in-camera discussion was I think there is some good news going to be coming forward in the not too distant future.
Thank you for
We'll
that.
leave it at that.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything to report? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I thought I should just provide a little bit of update from the Economic Development Forums that happened on the 11th and 12th, and I wanted to thank Council and staff for attending and all of their great participation. That was a really great session that we had, and I think it would be safe to say, Rob, there was probably somewhere between 110 and 120 people came out to the forums overall, and just shy of 200 surveys returned, so the consultants have a lot of information to work with. And I think you may already have in your calendars October the 16th for the next workshop, the 9 to 1 session. Yeah, I think that was the date that we had discussed with the consultants. So you'll be hearing about that shortly, the next phase of this process. So we're really excited about it and looking forward to it, and glad to see that it's moving along at a relatively steady pace. So more updates to follow.
Stay tuned. Thanks. Anything further? Councillor Vickers.
To add a little bit more to Harley's report about the Grace Auble, there is potential for Grace Auble asking for an increased funding from its municipalities, and I'm assuming staff knows that, and I just wondered what the rest of the council feels that if the provincial government cuts some of the funding to the conservation authorities, do we see a willingness from the municipality of Meaford to help bridge that gap, and how we feel that do we feel their services are well needed or well used?
Question for budget discussion. Councillor Bartley. Do you have an answer?
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. The Grace Auble is a thing we need and value, but not knowing enough about it, it comes off the tip of my tongue, and it's probably the wrong answer. I don't believe we should pony up for the provincial downfall. If anything, I believe the Grey Sauble has way too much property. They should sell some of the property they don't need to fund that. Thank you.
Through your worship, just with regards to the Grey Sauble funding and the meeting that we had with them, it's certain programs that they're going to be seeking additional funding for. So I think the further consideration by council would need to be considered in context of those additional programs, or those programs that they would likely not be able to continue. So that discussion should happen with council in the light of services.
Okay, and Councillor Greenfield?
Yes, just concerning Councillor Bartley's remark, and I could be wrong on this, I'm sure Mr. Armstrong can help me with this. I understand through the Conservation Act that, yes, first of all, we've got almost 29,000 acres of property, and some is questionable how it really fits in with the overall conservation plan. Not a lot of it, but there are a few properties that maybe we could argue. But I understand if we sell property, that money has to go into a reserve with the sole purpose of purchasing more properties. Now, am I right, Rod, or wrong on that?
I couldn't speak to the sale of property myself. No.
About half of it actually going back to the province, that the Conservation Authority couldn't retain 100% of the proceeds, that some of it would go back. So it's yeah. Anyway, I just didn't want all of a sudden, Grey Sauble to come up looking for more money, and then having my fellow councillors look at me and Harley and say, geez, where'd this come from? So it is on the radar, and I just didn't know how much people knew about it, and thought it was to bring it up.
Thank you for that. Anything else? Okay, we will move on to the building report. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Now, I told you things would get better, and there was an upsurge this last month. We're up to over $28.5 million worth of building permits, which is quite favorable. We still have 4 months to go, and the long-range weather forecast that I prefer to accept calls for good weather up until at least early December. So I expect a lot of construction activity will happen yet this fall, and we're going to add substantially to that $28.5 million. Thank you.
One of the things we haven't seen yet, and maybe may have an impact on that, is the new school site.
September.
In September. That will top the scales. Yeah. But it's welcome news. Okay. Now we move into, move out of committee of the whole. Move in a second, please. Councillor Kentner, Deputy Mayor. All in favor? And that's carried. And are there any notices of motion coming forward from council? Seeing none, we'll move into motions for decision. First one off the bat, Councillor Kentner's Meaford Sesquicentennial. Councillor Kentner, I'm assuming you'll put that on the table, will you? And a seconder, Councillor Bell. Okay. Do you wish to speak to this first?
Well, I think it's self-explanatory, and we talked a bit about it in a previous meeting. I just think that there won't be time for the next council to really adequately plan with only a year to adequately plan for a celebration of a sesquicentennial, and therefore I was hoping that we would take a look at that going forward and perhaps come up with an overarching plan, and most importantly get the groups and organizations throughout the municipality, or Meaford in particular, because it is Meaford's, the town of Meaford's sesquicentennial, to get involved in developing plans to mark that occasion suitably.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I thank Councillor Kentner for bringing this forward to our attention, and certainly that is an event worthy of celebration. My question to you is, were you thinking that of any budgetary impacts to this council in terms of preparing for that event, setting aside of monies each year, or what were you thinking in that regard?
I don't think that we have to spend a lot of money. I think we have to engage our population and get people thinking. And basically, a lot of people approached me and said, you know, what are you people doing about it? Because we want to get going. And so I think it's just a matter of officially starting to organize and involving the different groups and organizations.
Just a comment, and sorry, Councillor Greenfield. I'm recalling the 125th celebrations that was totally run by volunteers. It was part of that. And I'm curious that if you've had people coming to you and asking for some, to getting going, it sounds to me like there might be a core volunteer group now that would be interested in taking this on. And so I was just curious as to what you saw as council's role in terms of council developing an overarching plan, because if council does it, then it's a committee of council and we have to go through the acceptance processes.
My overarching plan would just be to invite groups and organize it, make them aware that we want to make it into a celebration, and give them the sort of the impetus to get going on planning, and assuring them that there maybe needs to be some kind of central clearinghouse for organizing plans, but...
Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Kentner. I had a very brief comment with yourself about this this motion, and I have two questions, both towards legislative services. Can this sitting council bind the activities of a future council? That is my first question.
Yes and no.
Excellent, because I like a good party. So.
Yes, you combine the activities of a future council in the fact that any bylaw or resolution that you pass remains in force and effect until such time as a future council deems it not to be. Where we get into a bit more difficulty is where you're requiring that a future council spends a significant amount of money and they don't have the opportunity to sort of back out of that. I don't think that either of those things would apply to this situation.
Okay, thank you on that. And my next portion on the last lines of this motion, I actually don't like it. And it says that where it goes with the therefore be it resolved, the overarching plan to encourage community groups and organizations, and here's where I'd like it to stop, right there. Because after that it says within urban Meaford. And to that end, I'll let Councillor Kentner speak for himself, but going back to our new coat of arms and bringing our communities together, all of our history, in all of our areas, I do not want to see a group like the Sydenham Optimist Club not be welcome to participate. I don't want to see even Royal Canadian Legion. We don't meet inside town. We're outside. And I know when I look back into 1974, I know the Legion itself had a good impact and a little bit of celebration. And so I would just like to see that the end of this be stopped right where it says we like to encourage inclusion of community groups and organizations, period. And I think that we're much bigger and we're much stronger than we were back in 1974 and previous. And I really believe that we need to include each and every organization wherever they're located inside this great municipality. And if I need to make a motion to strike that end, I am prepared to do that. But I don't like to see it just completely focused on the, with all due respect, the old town of Meaford.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. And along the same lines as Councillor Bell, I was considering putting forward a friendly amendment. It certainly is, this word urban is the one that I have trouble with. I was thinking about organizations in and around urban Meaford or surrounding urban Meaford. We can't restrict this, and the way it's written. I totally endorse the incentive. I agree with it 100%, but the former town of Meaford has a lot to be proud of. The existing town of Meaford has a lot to be proud of. But we are a part of the municipality of Meaford, and I think this is too restrictive by saying simply within urban. So, as I said, I would suggest even within and surrounding urban Meaford, just to open it up, to make it not just an urban celebration, but a municipal celebration.
Madam Mayor, if I can leap in here and take the rap to a certain extent, because I rather encourage Councillor Kentner to refine his language and use some of these words, because my concern is that both the Township of Sydenham and the Township of St Vincent were, of course, established in 1850, and so their sesquicentennial was in the year 2000. So what I didn't want this motion to do was say that we were celebrating the municipality's 150th anniversary, because it's not the municipality's 150th anniversary. So that's why I encourage Councillor Kentner to frame it around that sort of urban thing, but I don't think that would mean that it excluded anybody who wished to participate.
So how would we operationalize this then? That's the question.
You know, I don't think we're trying to commit future council. I think we're trying to make things easier for the next people in the next term of council. There will be some momentum by then, and the public will be carrying the ball on it. Is what I was hoping. That we I just think we need to provide an opportunity for different groups and organizations to start making plans. And on the wording, I think we can fine-tune that to suit people. I feel that it should include the entire municipality, but it is, in fact, just the town of Meaford proper that is having a sesquicentennial. And Sydenham was 1850, and I believe Sydenham was, sorry, St. Vincent was 1850, and Sydenham was earlier, I think.
We have bylaws for both townships from 1850, and that's the first.
1850. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. To me, an event of this magnitude needs a leader. It needs, maybe it's a time to reach out to organizations such as the Rotary Club and others to see if they're willing to take that position, because somebody, you know, has to organize the event. And I'm thinking of Canada Day and how the municipality really does take a lead role in that event and orchestrates the meetings, and because there's all the, you know, the nuances of road closures and so on, the municipality would have to be involved to some degree. So maybe it's an opportunity to reach out into the community to see if somebody's willing to take on that role, and then if they're not, coming back and seeing if it might be structured in the way that Canada Day is, with our events coordinator sort of organizing the structure of the event.
Councillor Bell?
Madam Mayor, thank you. I will move an amendment to this to strike 3 words within urban Meaford. And if everyone, anywhere, wish to help, wish to participate, step up, step forward. But I really do not like the concentration of the words within urban Meaford. So I move that those 3 words be struck, and I am very happy with having a celebration.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Vickers?
I think actually it might make a difference in this instance because the 150 years of growth and development that we're referring to is in the former town of Meaford. And of course, there was some growth and development in that geographic realm before 1874 as well, because otherwise it wouldn't have been made into a town. So you could either leave it there, or you could say to mark 150 years of growth and development in the former the geographic town of Meaford. Just seems we use geographic more than we use former these days. But I think there's probably recognizing how passionate some of our residents are about where they're from. I would be really cautious about just talking 150 years of growth and development in the whole community.
Councillor Vickers.
Through your worship, and I think that's what, at least that's my intention is, and I think it is for Tony also, is that we want to make sure everybody does feel included, because as soon as you say urban Meaford, then, you know, people that maybe live in Gursville or Bogner or Annan or Leith, they think, well, it's just for them. It's not for us. And I think we're trying to, you know, make it that it's for everybody, not just the urban part. It's for, you know, St. Vincent, Sydenham, and Meaford.
Through your worship, I absolutely agree, and please nobody take me as I'm trying to sort of sanctify this within one area. What I have heard from members of our public on a regular basis is that there is a perception that the municipality is too focused on the urban area, and so if we say 150 years of growth, full stop, there will be members of our community say, but Bogner's been here for 164 years, because it has.
Deputy Mayor.
Your worship, thank you. And I think sort of further to your comment a moment or two ago, and again, support the concept of this, but we adopt this today for argument's sake. What happens next? What is staff's role? How do you proceed with the recommendation in this motion?
That's, I guess, staff's concern is we don't know. This is council developing an overarching plan. I see it personally being very similar to, although it's a yearly event, the Scarecrow, where it's a group of volunteers that get together and put on this great event. And the municipality is there from a logistics point of view to support them with regard to road closures and things like that. That's how I probably see, and I don't know if Councillor Kentner intended it that way, that it's a group of volunteers getting together to put on this event, and staff are there based on our roles in support of it.
Can I ask, there were some souvenirs at the centennial event, and I always was under the assumption that the town had actually made these souvenirs happen. I showed them.
125th, you mean?
Pardon?
The 125th or the?
No, the centennial in 1974. 1974.
We have a coin that was struck for that.
Yeah, and so I would think that the town may be interested in doing a few things like that, but the main thing is to get to mobilize the community so that different groups and organizations can take a look at the calendar of 2024 and say, well, you know, we could do something, you know, in July, or we could do something in
Deputy Mayor.
Your worship, again, I don't think it happens successfully unless somebody like the municipality steps up and takes the lead. I don't know how you get this to move forward unless one of the organizations will do that. And I mean, this is a very big, very large, very special event, and perhaps we should be taking the lead in it and managing it as we do Canada Day. I mean, we want to be seen as, and again, we can't commit the next council, but we want to be seen, I think, as the leaders of the municipality in being very responsive and respectful of this anniversary. So maybe there's more discussion to be had yet.
Your worship, so this would be something that would fall under the manager of strategic initiatives, because this is a council strategic initiative if it does proceed. With regard to the resolution, then I would comment, because this really says is council develop an overarching plan, which what I can see is council directing staff to develop a plan, which is different than So we would probably require that clarification if you're requesting staff to take that lead. And that plan would include how we would resource it and deal with it over the next few years.
And might that be an enhancement, looking for the budget, something in the, you know, the budget discussions, because there would be a cost in terms of staff involvement. Councillor Bell and Councillor.
Thanks again, Madam Mayor. So I do have a seconder for striking those 2 words, urban Meaford. So
Okay,
we need
so
to vote on that.
We'll call a vote on that.
And the other comment I'll just say in passing to Deputy Mayor Keaveney. I got to know our Deputy Mayor in our adult lives a few years ago when there was no celebration of Canada Day. And as a group of people, we just got together and we made that ball happen. And it just took some initiative by some individuals with some personal drive. And I see this great celebration forming up that same way. And I don't think that you recall, and I know I don't recall, the municipality getting involved and getting back on board with Canada Day, if I can say it in those terms, because we certainly were key elements in getting Canada Day almost in the current format that we have now with yourself and some others that were key. So I think that we can count on that happening, Deputy Mayor. And I'm just interested to see on my fellow councillors striking these 3 words.
Okay, before we do that, Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for allowing me to comment before the vote. I agree that staff or council should get involved because there has been monies available by the provincial government for exactly this, and we should get involved and try to get some 2-3 years from now. Having said that, this is a celebration for urban Meaford. You can leave the last one in, but the one you're saying that only organizations within urban Meaford can start planning. If you accept this, don't ask the Legion, don't ask the base, don't ask anybody else out of town to help you. That's all. I agree with Tony, just the first one taken out of there. Yeah, thank you.
And certainly not the intention to exclude anybody.
So could we have a reiteration of that?
So I've got an amendment moved by Councillor Bell, seconded by Councillor Vickers, that simply says that the words within urban Meaford be deleted from the enacting clause of the motion. So that would leave us with, therefore be it resolved that Council develop an overarching plan for the sesquicentennial, including encouragement to community groups and organisations to start planning their participation in celebrations during 2024 to mark the 150 years of growth and development in urban Meaford.
Okay. So the amendment then would take out, and I don't have it in my copy of that's my problem. Within the urban, okay. All right, we'll call a question on the motion to withdraw those 3 words from the original motion. All in favor? And that is carried. Now going back, is there further discussion on the amended motion? I'm just wondering if there's any way to engage some of the folks that you've already contacted, or those who have contacted you, Councillor Kentner, and to see if they would form some kind of an organizing committee.
Through your worship, I actually don't really think we need to know that or do that right now, because as the motion says, the council develop a plan. So really this motion is saying that you want to do something, and then there can be further conversation over the next months to come about what that actually looks like.
Okay, so we don't have to make any other action. The reason I asked that question was to see whether this might be something that would be acceptable in terms of putting it into the plan if you had a core group that was willing, that we could support. And is that part of making it
Like
happen?
it's just various individuals who have, and the one lady in particular who they own the candle factory has been, you know, harping on this for 6 months that she wants to get involved, and she thinks it should be the biggest thing since sliced bread, which it could be.
Okay, so as amended, I'll call a question on this motion going forward. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, moving ahead with the adoption of the minutes, the council meeting of September 9th. Move in a second, Deputy Mayor? Yeah, okay. Just a moment, let me put it on the table. And are you going to put it on the table? Sure. And Councillor Greenfield? Okay. And so you have a comment?
Your Worship, thank you. Under announcements in the minutes, the last one where I recognize the anniversary of the Reeds fire, and it suggests and the firefighters who lost their lives, and thankfully no one did that day. They were injured, but there were no lives lost. That should
That's
be
a fix I
corrected.
need to make. Yes, thanks.
Thank you for that. That certainly is worth noting. Anything else? All in favor? And that is carried. And the closed meeting of September the 9th. Mover and a seconder, please. Put that on the table. Councillor Bartley and Councillor Greenfield. All in favor? That is carried. Okay. And the meeting of special meeting September 11th. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Kentner, Councillor Bell. All in favor? That is carried. Okay, going into communications, is there anything in here that Council would like to pull? Councillor Bell?
Item B, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, sorry, Councillor Greenfield? Okay. And we'll pull that Grey County Farm Safety Association. Councillor Bell, did you want to speak to that?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I hope that my fellow councillors have read that communications from the Grey County Farm Safety. As my fellow councillors are aware, I am the representative on that organization from ourselves here in the municipality. The clerk and myself have had a conversation about this request. The request is to the municipality of Meaford to give financial support to that organization. The rules for applying for grant money are well known, and they were well known to the chairman and the secretary of that organization, and it was missed. It was also missed because of my absence also from those deliberations. So whether I'm talking about this to ask this council to support financially now or back then, the point remains. They did not submit in time, and they missed. And when I was at the last meeting, I told them that a letter, such as what was written and submitted, that I would speak to help my fellow councillors come up with some money to help that organization. And Madam Mayor, I'll just take a little bit of liberty for a moment. Our group works on a very tight budget. It certainly does. And if you've been to fall fairs and we've had our booth up, this is not a chintzy little free handout. We use monies that we got from other areas. And in there, when we go out, we talk to people from urban and rural alike about staying safe. And persons would get this free handout with safety glasses and gloves and sunscreen and ear protection and so on. And all they had to do to engage us was say, what do you do in your life to help keep yourself safe? And they have a little conversation, and we were very happy to hand this out. And the safety glasses inside this alone were over $7. And we didn't want to go chintzy. If they take the time to talk to us, we wanted to give them something worthy to take home. One initiative that we have. The other initiative that we have, which is very important, is we just received at our last meeting some very sad statistics about where we live. And I came from the medical community. Unfortunately, this area has got the highest rate of accidents, and in particular to children. We're missing it. And we need to be out there, and we need to be able to go more places, more often, more literature to help all of the people who are in our area. So fellow councillors, the request is pretty simple. They missed the boat. They didn't file on time. They were clearly missed. And I'm hoping that this council will see fit to send some money to the Farm Safety Organization, as it will really be put to good use, and we have a very tight budget. So that is why I'm speaking, and I hope that through the financial department, we can come up with a way, if council wishes, to help support this fine organization. Thank you.
Matt?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Bell's reference to conversation he and I have already had, so I'll sort of do my procedural bit here. The policy that Council adopted for the community bursary programme was that we would award those grants once in a 4-year cycle, and they'd be awarded annually for each of those 4 years. Council did hold back approximately $2,500 a year from that pot of money that wasn't awarded, with the assumption that that could be used for new organisations if they appeared in the community between now and 2023. The Great County Farm Safety Association, of course, is not a new organisation. They have had funding from our previous community grant programmes. One comment, one suggestion. While this, of course, is a very worthy organisation and very key to a big industry in our community, if Council awards money here, then we've really sort of crossed the line on that policy, and now any other group that comes and asks for money, you can't stand on your policy that says we give it out once every 4 years, follow an application process where all applications are considered equally. The other suggestion that I've made through Councillor Bell, and I know he's talked to the group about it, but I do not believe they're particularly keen on this, is that when, as municipalities, we have been the members of organisations and formed the majority of that organisation, and in the case of this group, the majority of the board are elected officials appointed by their councils, in cases like the Wind Turbine Working Group, in cases like the Community Schools Allowance organisation, they have provided an annual membership fee to those organisations that wish to participate in that, and that membership fee was then paid by the municipality from a line in council's budget for memberships that was in the region of $550 a year for those previous organisations. So that is a different way of doing it, but it would require a bit more administration and a bit more organisation from this group, and certainly we would expect even more than we do now to get details from them on what they're doing and minutes and agendas and so on. Obviously, if they were going to do that, I'd expect it to be for every municipality that participates.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Pickers.
Through your worship, you know, I knew when Tony was talking about this stuff, that staff would just be like, you know, this isn't the way where we want to go, but it is a great organization, and it is for the kids. You know, my kids, they've gone through it, and they benefit. So sometimes it's just good to do.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had the pleasure a couple of weeks ago of attending the Meaford St. Vincent Fall Fair, and the Farm Safety Association did have a table there with a display, and I was able to hang around for a few hours and talk to people. Councillor Bell referred to the bag of goodies, and there are some very, very worthwhile items there. We had only 4 that we could give out that day. That was our limit, and you know, these things cost money. They do. So a lot of people were interested. I had a fairly good conversation with a young chap who was just started a property management / lawn maintenance service in our municipality. He was quite interested in farm safety and what they do, what they offer. So this is not only farm related. Anybody who drives a riding lawnmower or handles a whippersnipper, and there are hundreds of people who do that, they need to be aware of the safety necessary to operate these machines. So we have, for years and years and years, financially supported farm safety. We are a rural community. To me, this this is a given. We should be helping them out.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I thank Councillor Bell for bringing this forward and being so eloquent in his comments, and I agree, agriculture is our #1 industry, so who are we if we don't support safety within that industry? So I think we'll have to request that Mr. Myth find a way around this in the way that you do, because I think it's important that we step up and acknowledge this request for $550 and move forward.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I have a draft motion that Councillor Bell provided to me that says that Council of the Municipality of Meaford award the Grey County Farm Safety Association an annual community bursary of $550 for the period of 2019 to 2022 to be funded from the community bursary budget.
Okay. So.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move that.
I thought you might. And as a seconder for that motion, Councillor Vickers. Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? And that is carried.
Thank you, fellow councillors.
Okay. We have one quick one. Can we get through this before the planning meeting? Okay. And that is the Meaford Business Improvement Area, BIA, board minutes. And, sorry? Flag flying. Sorry. Wrong numbers on my printed agenda here. The request for flag flying. Somebody's going to, yeah, Harley is going to put that on.
Yes, and I'm a little bit late with this. This was a request from Mrs. Solomon concerning recognition of World Alzheimer's Day, which was actually the 21st of September. And, I don't know if there's anything we can still do, but maybe Mr. Armstrong has.
Yeah, through your worship, we did receive this request through our policy, and the flag was put up on Friday and will be up there for a week, as the water tower was lit blue and Meaford Hall did a light blue, so we did recognize it.
So there you go.
Just for clarity, because this will happen on a repeated basis, our policy says that the CAO has the responsibility to accept or deny these applications, but that all applications will follow on a council agenda after it's happened. So that's just for information.
Great. Super. There you go. So we have reached the magic hour, 6 p.m. plus, and we have a public planning meeting that we'll move into at this point. We have folks that have joined us for that purpose. So we'll move into that. I do have a script that we have to follow just to put it on record. And with that in mind, I will begin. Declare this meeting come to order. I, Barb Klumpus, Mayor of the Municipality of Meaford, hereby call this public meeting to order. This is a public meeting of council to consider a local official plan and zoning bylaw amendment under Section 22 of the Planning Act, applicable to Concession 9, East Part Lot 1, being 023547 Holland Sydenham Town Line, in the geographic township of Sydenham, now incorporated as part of the municipality of Meaford. The requirement to hold this meeting is that there must be 20 days' notice, and I will ask our clerk to confirm that that has been met.
Yep, notice was provided on August the 29th, thereby meeting the requirement.
Thank you. So we're here tonight to hear representation from those in favor and, if possible, those in opposition to the proposed official plan and zoning amendment applications for this property. So first, we will ask a municipal planner to provide a brief summary of the applications, related legislative requirements, and any comments received to date. And then she will outline how members of the public can further engage with the process. Following the municipal planner's comments, we'll hear from the agent for the applicant, Ms. Kristen Rennie, and then we'll welcome any comments from anyone else who wishes to speak. So Liz, can you please provide us with any comments concerning this proposal and then introduce the applicant?
Okay, thank you very much. I certainly can. So this application, and I'm sure Kristen will get into much more detail, relates to land use applications under the Planning Act to establish permissions for a cidery development on the proposed lands. They are looking to establish site-specific official plan and zoning provisions for the property that would permit a cider tasting and retail use, as well as a multi-purpose event space, which would occupy a combined floor area of approximately 604 square meters, to be located in the southeast corner of the property. The various uses that would occur would be in conjunction with the permitted agricultural and agriculturally related production of cider on site, and a detailed site plan approval and agreement will be required as a part of any approval process. With that, I would note that there were a series of background studies and reports that were submitted along with the application forms, and those are available on our website if any members of council or the public wish to review them. I have received comments from several agencies that have been circulated, and I can speak to those just briefly now. So firstly, the County of Grey provided general comments and also then some very specific comments. It was one of their longer, actually, submissions than I've seen. They have been involved, I guess, through the pre-consultation for this file quite extensively, because up until their recent official plan, their new official plan, we had anticipated that there would have been the requirement for a county official plan amendment, but with the changes to the county official plan, that is no longer required, so it's just the local plan that needs to be amended. They have suggested that additionally comments be sought and provided by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, as the MOE will be the approval authority for the septic permit. They additionally suggested that the proposed uses would appear to conform to the provincial guidelines and county official plan regarding agricultural, ag-related, and on-farm diversified uses. They suggest that the municipality may wish to consider further review of the condition of the existing road network in addition to traffic volumes, as were covered within the traffic review letter that were submitted. They have recommended deferral of a decision until such time that the completed environmental impact study has been reviewed and accepted by the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority and municipality. Recommend some site plan control measures that could be included to limit noise generation on site, and have identified the potential that the municipality may want to look at our draft amendment to not include such specific size limitations on the agricultural related component of the uses, so that they may be able to pursue a zoning amendment as the facility grows organically. I guess with the expectation it's going to become wildly popular. Right. Grey Sauble Conservation Authority has also provided us with some comments. They generally note no objection to the approval of the applications, subject to their recommendations that they did provide within their comments. There are generally some tweaks to the site layout to maximize setbacks from the watercourse and wetland features on site. In addition, they've suggested that some of the studies looking at the stormwater management on site, where they're proposing a bioretention facility for quality and quantity retention, they would like some additional work done around that, being that they've identified there's a shallow perched groundwater table on the proposed property, or on the property. And then they just note that there would be permits required from their office under the applicable regulations. And the Niagara Escarpment Commission has identified that they have no comments. So I guess that's really what we've heard so far. And it looks like Kristen has a lovely presentation all set to go for us. So through you, Madam Mayor, if I can invite Kristen to come in and speak to us.
Well, welcome, Kristen.
Thank you.
I'm assuming this is for me. Yes? Okay, thank you. That's not going to work. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. My name is Kristen Rennie. I'm from Georgian Planning Solutions, and I'm the agent acting on behalf of the property owner and the applicant. Okay. There we go. Okay. So the purpose of the public meeting tonight is to consider an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment to permit on-farm diversified use to comprise of cider tasting, hospitality and retail uses, and a multi-function special event venue to support an apple growing and cider production facility, which is already permitted on the subject property. The property is located at 023547 Holland Sydenham Town Line, Concession 9, East Part Lot 1 in the municipality of Meaford in Grey County. Liz did mention that we had submitted some support documents as part of our submission, and that included a planning justification report, a functional servicing and stormwater management report, an environmental noise study, traffic review, scoped environmental impact study, a geotechnical report, a hydrogeological study, and as well we completed the minimum distance separation calculations. So the county official plan designates the property rural and hazard. The Meaford official plan also designates the property rural and environmental protection, and the zoning in the Meaford zoning bylaw 60/2009 zones the property rural and environmental protection. And Liz did mention briefly that we did submit an official plan amendment to the county, and that was because the county had size-specific requirements for agriculture-related and on-farm diversified uses, very similar to your plan. And since the new official plan, the recolor gray, has been approved by the province, we no longer require that amendment. Therefore, we withdrew our amendment. And this is because the proposal is now in conformity with the county plan and the provincial guidelines as they pertain to agriculture, agricultural-related, and on-farm diversified uses. This is a picture showing the cidery. It's looking north, and so I'm just going to give you a little overview of the proposal of the cidery, just so to put some context to the request that we have in front of you this evening. The owner of the property, Dawn McGregor, developed an interest in orchard after the opportunity presented itself to purchase the property adjoining her existing land. So she owns the property to the north as well, and she knew that it was an orchard. Her research and curiosity turned into a passion and love for cider and all things apple, and the location for the business was selected as a perfect fit due to the geographical situation, natural beauty, and vistas. This passion led to this concept that's in front of us today. Under the current planning policy framework, the orchard, the associated production of apples and cider, as well as the necessary agricultural buildings and infrastructure, are agricultural uses and agricultural-related uses and are permitted. In addition, small-scale on-farm diversified uses are permitted, including the retail sales area, cider tasting, and the hospitality function. The subject property is just over 20 hectares, just over 51 acres in size, with approximately 1.25 hectares, or just over 3 acres, of the property proposed for the cider operation, which is what we're looking at here. There are currently 5 acres of orchards on the property, with an additional 15 acres of orchard to be planted in the coming years. The proposed cidery building is 22,000 square feet, approximately, a little bit more than that, or 2,000 meters square in size, and includes the storage of apples, the facilities required to make and store the cider, as well as cider tasting and hospitality and retail areas. There's also a greenhouse that will grow and display apples that are grown in our area, but also not able to grow in our climate. The facility will produce a variety of ciders, including champagne cider, dry cider, medium cider, and sweet cider, and it will also have apple juice for the children, and we'll show how it is made as well, and apple cider vinegar. One additional opportunity that presented itself while working through the development of the cidery was the realization that there was a lot of good water on this property. This has now become an additional opportunity for the cidery. It will allow the cidery to utilize the infrastructure to bottle water on site and provide another revenue stream for the farm. This will also include carbonated and flavored water in glass bottles. This product will be produced and bottled within the existing facility and will not impact the cider production, but will allow value-added product on off-season times. In addition, the client really wants there to be an educational aspect to this project, with the goal to educate people, especially children, on farming, apples, nature, and the environment. I just have a few more pictures to show you. So this is the site plan, just to give you context. So the access point will be on Concession Road 8, and that's the access point there. We've got the parking area. This is the first phase of the facility, which is an existing barn that's on the property, with the next phase being the cider production area, and then this is the greenhouse here. And then that is the stormwater management facility on site. This is the building, and again, it's just sort of it's hard to see maybe, or unless it's on your computers. This is the existing barn, and again, the processing area for the cidery, and then the greenhouse. Some elevations of the proposal, the south elevation, so that would be what you would see from the Sidon Holland side road. I think that's what it's called, is it a side road? Town line, sorry. And then this is the north elevation would be what you see when you're in the parking lot walking towards the cidery. Just a rendering of this would be within the existing barn that would be looking out towards the orchard. And this is just some conceptual ideas of the feel of what the cidery is going to be like in terms of the architectural design and throughout the facility. So what we really are here for tonight, again, which Liz had mentioned, as I did at the beginning as well, is the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment. Specifically for the official plan, it's section B2 1.4.9. And again, it's a site-specific amendment, but those are the policies that we sort of need to amend, and they relate to the size restriction related to the on-farm diversified uses. So your policies talk to 75 square meters, and we are proposing 605 meters squared, which are in line, and actually the county plan and the provincial policy direction allows for even larger sizes than what we are permitting or proposing. And it's very similar with your zoning bylaw. The policies are very similar in terms of the floor area with a maximum of 75 meters squared, where again, we're proposing a larger facility. So that's the Chatsworth Farm Orchard Cidery. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful. Is there any questions of Council? Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for bringing this forward to us. I'm familiar with microbreweries and wineries and cider operations, and just from what your presentation is tonight, this is a multi-million-dollar endeavor. Mm-hmm. This is a very serious, looks like a very wonderful thing to have happen if we can see fit to allow these amendments. And should that happen, I wish you well in this and the proponents, because this is not just something that's small and quaint. Your renderings there will put the municipality of Meaford again on the world map of places to come and see and do. So this is big time, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Kristen. Yes, Councillor Vickers.
So I have a couple of quick questions. Is it an all-in, all at once sort of a thing, or is it done? You talked about stages.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Vickers. It is a phased approach. Again, the barn that is already on the site is the beginning process. Then the processing area, which is the building that would be in front of the barn, and then the greenhouse would be the third phase. And it all sort of depends how things evolve in terms of timing. We don't have a distinct timeline, but that's the phasing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Follow up?
Quick one. The water part of it, I don't know whether that has anything to do with us, or like, is that a concern about permits? Is it easy enough to do, Liz? Do we have any jurisdiction or any say over that, or concern?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So as Kristen mentioned, it's something that's kind of evolved for them as they've been looking at the proposal overall. So we've only very recently had discussion on a preliminary basis around the water taking component. As I understand, generally we view water taking of 50,000 litres a day or more as a separate and distinct land use. I don't know that we're fully clear on the volume with that, and I suspect we would see some addendum reports to their hydrogeological study in support of their water taking permit for bottling purposes. My understanding is right now there is a moratorium on issuance of permits for bottled water, but that ceases in January. So I suspect that we will see some changes or policy or something kind of coming through the pipe in the interim period to update that legislation. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, I guess, is the long-winded answer. to that, but we will be exploring that with them as we move forward, just to make sure if, you know, if there is additional notification, a study that would come out of that in order to support that component of the use. But I think generally the discussion we've had to this point in time is that you know, their hydrogeological study indicates general support for that as one of the additional uses on site. That would not be their primary goal, I guess, but it would be another opportunity based on the resources that are available to them with the infrastructure they're already planning to establish on site.
Yes, Councillor Kenny.
If I may, just a few short questions. How many employees ultimately?
That is a very good question.
Yeah, so
Sorry.
because of this phased in, we start with like 5 to 13, and then we have, of course, when the orchard is there, we have a lot of people like the crews that are out there, like cutting the trees and picking later the apples, of course.
Do you have like a dollar value for the total development? If it, like it is, Councillor Bell says it's a multi-million, is it to 5 million? Is it?
You mean from a construction
Yes.
perspective?
So it is close to 3 million, and we're starting our first phase at 1.2 million.
And just one and last, if I may, the types of events that you envisage happening there, like are we talking weddings or, you know?
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I may.
Please.
Weddings are definitely part of it, educational opportunities for schools, corporate meetings, your typical sort of events that would want a beautiful location.
Okay, who else did I have? Councillor Greenfield and then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. It's obvious you've done this kind of thing before. Very, very complete. I have a couple of questions. I need to get straight. Now, there are going to be apples growing in the greenhouse, also outside on the open land. Is that correct?
If I may, yes. So currently there are 5 acres of trees that have been planted with an additional, I think it's 15 that are still to be planted, yes, in the future, as well as the greenhouse. So the greenhouse will function to produce apples, but also have it as an opportunity for people to see the different variations that can, well, they're part of the enjoying the cider. The greenhouse will be there year round because we don't grow apples in the winter, so it would allow us to have that. But it would be both.
Thanks for that. Are there plans for any new exotic brands of apples or that we aren't familiar with at this time?
Potentially, yes.
So there is for example, there are apples that, there are only 2 trees, I think, in a row, and that apple tastes like a pineapple. And so those are the trees that you will find in that greenhouse. Like, and the way we want to set it up is that you have some sort of a Q code, so you go with your phone to it or a tablet or whatever, you scan the Q code, and it will give you a history of what kind of apple tree it is, and well, how it tastes like, when they grow, where they grow, and etc. So, like the education part is a big part of that whole cidery aspect.
Thank you. Very exciting. Just one last question. Is your name incorporated yet? And I can't help but refer to the Chatsworth part of it. It's fine if you want to hang with that, but I just wondered if it's too late to
Change the name.
maybe introduce another name.
I can't personally comment on that, but I do know the owner of the property lives in Chatsworth, well, because we're right on the line, right? So her property is in Chatsworth, this farm is in Meaford. No?
The address is
Oh.
for Chatsworth.
Right.
It's in this building.
Oh, I know this property is. She owns the property adjacent to the north. Oh, I thought it was in Chatsworth. Oh, there you go, I didn't know that. There you go.
But the address, so the address is in Chatsworth of the original farm, and that's how the name came into effect.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
Your worship, thank you. And yes, I was going to mention something similar. Is there sort of a rough proposed date that you would hope to open the facility? Tomorrow, good.
I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah,
You want
so
to answer?
because this phase, so the first phase, we hope to start making cider this year. And then the next phase, that will be the spring next year, will be the addition of like the hub and the bridge that you saw on one of the renderings. And then slowly, because we have to make, we cannot have people in there if we're still building, right? So that would not be safe. So, and there's also the Disability Act, so we need to have like the parking. We want people to enjoy it, and that's for everybody. So we cannot say, well, sorry, we're in a wheelchair, we don't have a ramp yet. So it doesn't work that way. So to answer your question, are we open for making cider? Yes, we are. Are we open to the public? Not this year.
I understand, thank you, and it's an incredibly exciting project, and we're thrilled to be hearing about this within our municipality. Is it your eventual hope to be able to start selling cider in restaurants in the LCBO and outside of the actual cidery? Yeah, yeah, that's terrific. Well, please let council know when you're open for the public.
My question is unusual to have greenhouses for apple orchards. Is this an unusual situation? What kinds of trees would you be having in the greenhouse?
I think that the intent is to have trees that couldn't grow in our climate from an educational perspective, unless they're, and then...
The 2 pineapple trees?
More, yeah. We'll just have one, probably.
Just one?
So the thing is in the area that we are in, what is killing apple trees is the full like a lynch, right? So all the apple trees are based on a Russian rootstock, and they're crafted on a Russian rootstock because the rootstock is not freezing. And what is going into the greenhouse are apples that are not crafted on
Russian.
So that's to keep it all. And some apple trees, they cannot grow under like 15 degrees, but they will just die. That's what the greenhouse is for. And it will become, because of that, like also a winter destination, because in the winter there's nothing up there.
Right, as we know. Wonderful, wonderful project. Anything further, Councillor Barkley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just another comment. I have tasted the cider. It's wonderful, and if you want a sample, I could get you one.
Thank you for all of that information. I will call on anyone from the public if they wish to support the application or not. We have some individuals in the back, just interested bystanders. Okay. Anything, Liz, to add at this stage?
So just in terms of process, so I think Kristen and I need to have some further discussions around addition of uses with respect to the water bottling in particular. And then I think we will be working our way towards a staff recommendation and report to come back to council with the proposed amendments. At that point in time, council will make their decision, and the official plan amendment will go on to the county for adoption, approval, as they are the approval authority for those applications. And then we would get into the detailed site plan review process with them as well, dealing with agreements. So we've got a little bit of additional work to do, but as the applicants have noted, it is a phased approach. So I'm hoping that we can align with that process for them and keep them on their schedule.
And the schedule would be to have this come back to council within...
Before the end of the year? Yeah.
Definitely by the end of the year. Wonderful. Thank you very much. We will certainly give a considerable consideration to this wonderful project. Wish you the best of luck with it. And thank you for attending this afternoon. And I will declare this meeting adjourned at this point. Thank you for coming. And that takes us back to our council meeting with the last item adjournment of our council meeting. You have, yes? Nothing? Okay. You look confused. I will declare this meeting adjourned. We're done. There you go, my dear.